Vestiges After Dark is a philosophical speculation program sponsored by the Holy Nicolayan Catholic Church, an independent Catholic church inspired by the diversity of early Christianity and in communion with the Old Catholic Church. Presiding Bishop Bryan Ouellette presents perspectives on esotericism, metaphysics, philosophy, psychology, paranormal research, theology, spirituality, religion, and Catholicism. We are not affiliated with the Church of Rome. Our discussions of Catholicism are broader than, and distinct from, the Church of Rome. The views and opinions expressed are those of the individual participants.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever the case may be. For all of you listening out there across the crazy planet Earth, welcome to Vestiges After Dark. And I am your host, Bishop Bryan Ouellette, coming to you live from the deep woods of western Georgia on this May 26, 2026. Well, last week I gave you homework. You had to come up with a bunch of questions for us today. It's everyone's favorite show. It is the show where you get to be the guest. All of your questions from all over the internet on all of the platforms we'll be taking tonight on Vestiges After Dark. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to a brand new edition of Vestiges After Dark. I am your host, as always, Bishop Bryan Ouellette, and we are going to get ready tonight for an exciting open lines, open topics with all of you. I hope that you have a whole bunch of questions for us, because the more questions that you have for us, the better this show tends to be. And certainly we'll be taking all of the questions from all of our simulcast platforms, be it TikTok or Instagram. YouTube or Facebook. Our moderators are on the lookout for all of your questions, and you can start bringing them into the chat at any time. It doesn't matter if there's other discussion going on. Just go ahead and put your question out there. Our moderators will get it over to our panel, and then we will do our best to answer the questions that you give us. And no topic is off. No topic is off topic, all right? No topic is off limits. Anything that you want to ask us, we will do our best to answer. I cannot promise you that you will like the answer, but I can promise you that I will give you a fair chance, and I won't get angry at anything you have to say. Unless, you do something really stupid, like a troll or something like that. We don't tolerate that very well. We have enough of that with the little 30-second clips that we put out there. That becomes sort of the basis for what we call Internet Inquisition, which I guess I do kind of have an Internet Inquisition for you tonight. I noticed that there was somebody on a YouTube that decided to complain about, I guess, the last one. Anytime that you do anything that's even remotely political, and the last week's show was slightly political, only because how can you talk about the divisiveness of social media and even mainstream media without, discussing the primary topic that everyone seems to be obsessed with, and that's politics. In fact, as we talked about last week on the show, Father Chris Yates made a very good and keen observation that's quite accurate. And that is that people have made politics their religion. It used to be science for a while. It used to be God for a long time, but now it's politics. That's the one that everyone's really focused on. And so, little clips went out there, and we had one, I think it was yesterday's actually. Basically it was entitled, "The U.S. is Not Divided, the Surprising Truth About Americans." And this is where our guest last week talked about how Americans pretty much agree on 80% of all issues. It's just, 10% of the extreme left and 10% of the extreme right that create the conditions for divisiveness. I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, I don't know if he gave us a source for that, but it seems reasonable to me, and I trusted the guest. So I'm sure if we asked him for a source, he would have been able to provide one. So it seems like a accurate statistic. And so, of course, somebody came on and said, this was about 14 hours ago, "You can thank Obama for that, buddy, and Joe Biden. Unbelievable." No punctuation, by the way. And I came back, of course, I can't let things like this go. So I came on and I said, who cares? I'm far more concerned about who we can thank for fixing it. And you should be too. I want to be one of the people finding a solution, not pointing the blame at scapegoats. So I don't really give a shit if it's Obama. I don't care if it's Joe Biden. I would actually argue that it started with George W. Bush. Okay, so, I mean, who cares who the source of the problem is? We should be focused on fixing it. And that kind of attitude is exactly the reason why this problem continues. Because nobody's concerned with the solution. They only want to point the blame. And as long as you're blaming people about things in the past that you can't do anything about, well, guess what happens? Nothing gets done. Nothing gets fixed. And then you can just wallow in the miserable, shitty world that you create from that, because that's all you're going to get back out of it. It's the same thing with religion, right? We can blame the church because it did this and blame the church because it did. Look, I understand the church can be a real pain in the ass sometimes. I get it. And historically, after 2,000 years, you have a lot of moments where you can talk about this. But the fact of the matter is, in the end, who gives a shit what the church did 2,000 years ago? You're the church today. What are you going to do with it? It's not the church of 2,000 years ago that exists right now. It's the church of today, which is you. So instead of blaming them and leaving it and getting all, butthurt or, do something about it. Fix it, okay? And that's kind of, I think, that's our Internet Inquisition for this week. It wasn't too bad. It wasn't really too bad. But I just get, look, stop blaming them, okay? All right, stop blaming everybody. Because I'll tell you right now, the liberals are blaming Donald Trump. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What matters is what you do now, what you do going forward. Who's going to be the one to fix it? Why don't you want to be that person? I don't want to be the one pointing the blame. I want to be the one that has the solution. And maybe people can look back and say, hey, that guy, he helped to fix it. That would be a great thing. But, it is what it is. And also, let me remind you today and always that Vestiges After Dark is completely and fully sponsored by the Holy Nicolean Catholic Church, which means we don't have money coming in for this. It's our own ministry that pays for this show. So, we do have a little QR code in the corner of the screen there that, we would be delighted if you would click it to provide a donation, or even better, a monthly pledge for this show if you really find value in it. But what's also important, if you can't or won't do that, is to share, like, subscribe to the channel. Wherever you're watching this, share, like, and subscribe. All right. And also comment. Comment on every video because, this is the one thing about, I shouldn't get so upset about the internet inquisitors out there. You know why? Because they actually help, they help the algorithm. The more conversation that happens, even if it's really negative conversation, in fact, negative conversation, as we learned last week, probably helps the algorithm even more. So when they troll and they do these nasty comments, that actually pushes it further out there, because it gets flagged. Oh, this is controversial. People are going to want to pay attention to this, But if you comment and share and like, that's what also helps the channel. Okay, understand. You all asked for a 3-hour podcast. All right, that's not what algorithms like. Algorithms don't like 3-hour podcasts. You know why? Because it's very much well known within the realm of internet business models that people have a very short attention span, which is why TikTok's so popular, because you get a little 3-second clip of something stupid and everyone eats it up, millions of views, goes viral overnight. But a 3-hour show, to have somebody sit down and actually pay attention for 3 hours, statistically, that's not going to happen. So most of our audience is on demand, audio only, probably truck drivers and people that are stuck on the road with nothing to do. And so they listen to us for as long as they can. And so we look, I'm not changing the format. All right. But I can tell you right now, if we did a little 15-minute pre-edited show, the algorithm would go bonkers. We'd be getting views left and right if that was the format. The 3 hours hurts us. What can help counteract that is if you like, share, subscribe, and comment. That's what will counteract that effect. So please don't forget to do that every show. Okay, well, if you're already subscribed to the channel, you don't have to worry about that. But you can always like every show. You can always comment on every show, and you can always share on every show. And it doesn't matter where you are, if you're on Facebook or TikTok, wherever, just make sure you do it, okay? Joining us from down south in Georgia, we've got Jamie Wolfe. She's actually with us, but she's remote today. How you doing today, Jamie?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm at the homestead tonight. I've got a lot of stuff going on, so I had to stay at the house tonight. But nice, rainy and dreary here.
Yeah, it's been pretty stormy, and I guess I should warn the audience. Right now, it looks like most of the worst of it is behind us, so I think we're okay. But, you never know when there's a lot of storms in the area. The power can go out, and if the power goes out, the show goes out. And, even though we have a generator and everything, it takes 2 seconds for it to kick back on. The internet gateway will shut down. It takes about 10 minutes for that one to reboot. It would be no point in trying to come back on. Okay, so if we get kicked off, it's because of the storms in the area. But right now, I think we're behind. The worst of it's behind us, so I think we're okay. So probably for the best, Jamie, that you didn't come in today.
Yeah, it's hasn't been too bad, but heavy downpours about every 20 minutes for the last couple hours here, and I think we got more coming on my end, but nothing real severe, just heavy downpours.
Yeah, just a lot of rain, and we need it. It's been a drought here terribly this past couple months, so it's nice to see that's kind of saturating the ground, and it prevents, I live in the deep woods. I don't say that lightly. That's not an exaggeration. I live in the woods, and the last thing I need is a forest fire, okay? Because everything could go up in smoke. Me too. Yeah, you're the same. So, I'm glad that there's rain. I never complain about rain, never. I'm always happy to have it. And actually, I kind kind of like overcast. I'm one of those people that, I'm the opposite of seasonal affective disorder. The darker and drearier it is, the happier I tend to be. I do enjoy, sunshine, Caribbean beaches and all that stuff, but only in the vacation context. The rest of the time, I prefer it to be rainy and dreary as much as possible. I should probably live in the Pacific Northwest. That would make me very happy. Except for the politics. I don't think I could deal with all that.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate. It really is. And it's not because I hate liberals. It's because I just hate that kind of progressive asshole that, tends to gravitate to that part of the country. Not that, it's a whole lot better on the other side of the fence down here, but it's a little bit better because it's more balanced. Atlanta's very balanced. We've got a very, it's just balanced. You got your liberals and your conservatives, and it seems to work around here a little better than other places. But anyway, for now, yeah. I mean, hey, look, it is what it is. It's the only nice. Let me say something nice about Atlanta because I don't typically do. This is one of the things I can say about it that I actually don't mind. Is that at least you got both types of people, and it is what it is. All right, joining us from Australia, we have Father Chris Yates. So even further south, we have Father Chris. How you doing tonight, Father?
Yeah, I'm good. I mean, I'm a bit with you because I was born and raised in Manchester, and it famously rains all the time in Manchester, and so rain is kind of home for me.
Yeah, it's nostalgic for you, right?
Yeah, and actually the last few days here have been a bit like that, kind of drizzly rain, and we've got about 20 different words for rain in Manchester because
right.
it rains so much. We're a bit like Eskimos with snow, but actually today's is a bright blue sky, which I'm kind of pleased about because I'm not pleased I've got to fly to Canberra, but I do have to fly to Canberra this evening, so I'd rather the skies were relatively clear.
Yeah, makes a better flight, definitely. Yeah, so.
Yeah, and occasionally I do have to go to the den of iniquity that is our federal parliament, and tomorrow is one of those days, so I'm flying down this evening. So
well, make sure you take a lot of holy water with you, okay?
I know, absolutely. Yeah, that's right. Insect repellent as well.
Yeah, bathe in it when you get out of there. Joining us from Tennessee, we have April Narad. How you doing tonight, April?
I'm doing pretty good. It's also raining. It's been raining nonstop for well over a week now here. So
same here. I mean, basically, your weather is our weather. You're close enough that we pretty much have the same system that comes through.
Yeah, I do have to ask: how many people went and watched The Mandalorian?
I'm going to probably see it I think it's this Sunday we're going to go. I haven't had a chance to get over to it. So don't give me any spoilers yet. I've only heard the obvious that, people don't like it, but I don't want this to be the only Star Wars movie I've never gone seen in theaters. So
it's fashionable for people not to like anything.
Yeah, I know.
Like, it's like everything, like you said, with negative comments online. Like, yeah. It's become the sort of the generic vogue in the West to just be negative about everything. And that for me, I'm just like boring.
I really liked it. It was really good from my perspective.
Did you see the series, or have you seen all 3 seasons of the actual series?
I did, and I also watched Boba Fett. Okay. And you really don't have to see the series to know what's going on, which is nice. But it was really good. I mean, I always judge an action show by how soon after one starts that they start having explosions. Mm-hmm. And if it's within 30 minutes, it's good. Well, this one was within 15 minutes. So
okay. So how does it compare to season 1 of The Mandalorian? Is it as good as that? Is it on par with that? Is it not quite as good as that?
Well, I kind of liked the later seasons of The Mandalorian better than the first.
Oh, really? Okay. So most people like the first season, so.
Yeah. So I would say it compares, to the later seasons. So I think it was really good. So. Okay.
Well, that's promising. I mean, we're going to go to the 4D theater downtown. Mm-hmm. We like that one for the big movies. You got to do it, so the explosions actually rock you. If you're not careful, you'll fall right out of your seat onto your ass. You will. It's really wonderful. I love it. I mean, we do it for
Sonic 3 had us jerking around on our seats.
Yeah, I mean, and you got to really hold on, don't you? It's like a roller coaster.
Now, I did watch it in 3D, and that was pretty good. Although you didn't have to, but it was kind of neat to have like the people like right here in your face when they're talking to each other and fighting and stuff. So that was kind of cool.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to know. I'm happy to hear that. Maybe it's not going to be a complete flop, but like you said, you can't trust anything you read online or see online anymore. Hopefully, you can trust this show, because this show's not about the bullshit. You can't buy me out. All right. You can't buy me off. You can't pay me off. I mean, money is kind of irrelevant to me. So at this point, this is going to be it's not called Vestiges for nothing. It's one of the last vestiges of truth that's probably out there on the internet. If we don't know something, we tell you we don't know. If you ask me a question, I give you my best educated guess if I have some idea as to what it might mean, or I give you the facts as I understand them. I hope that more people. I wish that more people did that, but people sell out. No one's ever going to buy this show off, so it is what it is. But understand, there's a lot of fraud out there, and now that
truth has never been popular.
No, it has never. No, you're right about that. But it's worse when money's involved.
Pilate asked Jesus, "What is truth?"
I know, right?
He was literally staring truth in the face.
Yeah, it's a good one. That's one of my favorite. It's probably my favorite verse in the Bible, honestly.
Oh yeah, it's a brilliant verse.
It really is. And it was said by a pagan. Go figure. Mm-hmm. All right. Speaking of pagans and all that, I'm sure we have a lot of questions. So we always start these shows off, Open Lines, Open Topics, with questions from the ether, as every show does. And we can take more time with the questions from the ether because we can kind of let it bleed into the other segments if need be. But log your questions now. If you have questions for us, please, by all means, start asking them. I'll put the phone number for the show on the screen in the second hour, and it will stay there through the third hour. And you can call into the show. It's always a much better show when you call in, but most people prefer to just do the chat room thing. So that's fine, too. Either way, we will do our best to answer all your questions. The only problem is, it seems like more questions come in the last half hour of the show for some damn reason. So
it's like a therapy session. All the best questions at the end.
So we never really can always get to them. I know that tonight, though, Questions from the Ether seems to be some questions from previous shows where we ran out of time. So ask them anyway. Even if we don't get to them this show, you might hear it next show. You never know. And in fact, April, I kind of like this. If you see a question that comes in that we don't get to, make that one of the questions for the ether, or all three for next episode. Okay, next week. Just do that, and hopefully we can get through them. So that everybody's question can be answered. Which means you need to listen to every show or watch every show. Okay, because you never know when your question is going to get answered on another episode. All right, let's get started with tonight's question from the ether. What do you got from us tonight, April?
We also already have questions in the chat for tonight, too.
Okay, good. All right. Well, we'll get to those after the ether, but let's start with the ether, and then we'll dig into the chat.
All right. The first question from the ether is, if the land is wounded, can we humans try to heal it? And that was from one of the Vestiges shows.
Yes. Okay. That was from the April 12th show. The third
May 12th.
May 12th. Okay. I'm sorry. May 12th. Yes.
Sorry, I missed the fundamental question there. What was it?
If the land is wounded, can we humans try to heal it?
So this was, I think, a question for our guest when he was talking about, that Utah, that there's been a lot of damage done to the people that are indigenous to that particular area, and that it has affected adversely the land. So I don't know what his answer would have been exactly, but I can give you my answer as an exorcist, because sometimes in exorcism ministry, we have to handle environmental problems. Sometimes the problem is not with a person. Sometimes the attachment is to the land, or some other inanimate object. Sometimes it's a house, right? I mean, that's all basis of hauntings. It's not always people. In fact, a lot of times it's not people. A lot of times it is just the environment. So land can be damaged spiritually, can have attachments. It's very much a thing. And I wouldn't be able to do my work if it couldn't be done. So yes, land can be healed. It is done slightly differently than what we do for people, where you don't do solemn exorcisms on land. That's something that's reserved for people alone. But minor exorcisms can be done. In fact, even a house blessing is almost a type of exorcism for property. Okay, and so yes, we will go if there's a troubled location or something like that. If people are reporting it, they need our help, they call us out there, we will go, and if exorcism's warranted, we'll perform a minor exorcism of the land. There's other things that can also be done. Certainly, on occasion, if it is a problem of another type of spiritual nature, maybe not necessarily demons in the Judeo-Christian sense, but some other kind of elemental problem or some kind of thought form that's produced out of another tradition, it can be effective to use the solutions that are relative to that particular worldview, and if we know the process, we can use that process, and we've done that a few times. Although, we try to do the methods of the church first, if it's appropriate. And I will say that in most cases it is appropriate, and in most cases it is all that's needed. And that fixes it, but it's a slow process. Now, what we're talking about, or where this question was spawned from on that episode a couple of weeks ago, when we were talking about Utah, that's not something that, I can go over to Salt Lake City and perform a minor exorcism on the entire city and expect that, okay, now things are going to be better going forward. It doesn't work quite like that. We can do a massive blessing. That is possible. But remember, there's a lot of influence there. See, part of what happens when you do a house blessing for a family is that you have a relationship with that family. It's usually a pastoral setting. And so even though maybe things have happened that have led to a less than ideal spiritual condition in that environment, part of the pastoral work of the exorcist is to come in and not just perform the exorcism, but talk to the people, the family that lives there, and help them to come up with a better spiritual life, so that also affects and changes the environment, and the grace of the blessing helps them to do that. That's the whole point of it. But when you're talking about a large area, part of a state or a city or something, you can't possibly pastorally care for every single person in that city, because I can tell you right now, a lot of them aren't going to even want it, even if you are willing to do it. So there's only so much that you can do, because you're always having to fight against the other influences in the region, and there's a lot of evil people out there, for lack of a better way of putting it, or at least people that do really evil things, and all the blessings in the world, all the exorcisms in the world are not going to change the fact that those influences are going to remain and are going to counteract a lot of the good that is done. So it's just as important. Remember, blessings don't really change anything. Exorcisms don't really change anything. What they do is they inject a very particular type of grace that if the person who's receiving it uses it, then great things can happen. If the person refuses to use it, the exorcism's not necessarily going to do anything. Okay? And the blessing will absolutely not do anything. That's just a fact of how spirituality works, because, again, an exorcist is not Jesus. Jesus is the ultimate exorcist. The exorcist is just a facilitator for that grace. Okay? And the same thing goes for, these other kinds of opinions that people tend to have, that they think that we're wizards coming in with incantations and, doing spells and, casting out these dark forces. No, it's calling upon the grace of the church through Christ, and then the people that are there have to use it. Okay? That's how it works. And if people don't want to use it, then guess what? It doesn't change anything until they do. Same thing with baptism. I always marvel when people tell me, "Oh, I don't want to baptize my baby because I don't want to determine their spiritual destiny. They need to do that when they're older." And I'm saying, what are you afraid of? I mean, look, it's the fact of the matter is, even if getting them baptized is not going to change the fact that if they want to go practice Buddhism when they're 18 or even 15, the baptism's not going to stop them from doing that. So why not give them access to the grace? Because if they do decide to be a Christian, now they've had that grace their whole life that they can draw from. If they don't want to use it, they don't have to use it. Baptism doesn't change your nature, not that way, not your human nature. It changes your spiritual nature, but only if you want it to. It's still freedom. It's not coercion. So, these are things that people don't understand about sacraments. Father, do you have any ideas about this?
It actually gives you the freedom to choose baptism. But,
yeah, it does.
But I want to be a more radical, going back to the original question.
All right.
And I use the term radical on purpose because radical is where we get the word radish from. It means the root. So the word radical is being used to mean extreme. And I want to fight against that culture. Radical means what is the root of this thing, so if the question is how do we heal land, well, the radical answer is we don't, because and like you said, which is exactly why you can't just. Otherwise, the Pope would just bless the whole earth, and all these problems would be solved. That's just not how it works.
Yeah.
And I did mention it, I think, on that show. I certainly mentioned it on other shows that. The truth is, no matter how beautiful nature is, and we should find it inspiring and beautiful, and it reflects the glory of God in as much as people do. But just like people, it's also a fallen world. It is not a utopian world. It's not heaven. And so, the fall, the story that's with the allegory that's within Genesis is not only an explanation for why human nature is flawed. And people that don't acknowledge that are the people that are ruining our lives, by the way, because they think that they can come up with just the right leaders and the right answers, and then everything will be perfect. And right and left do that, okay, to in different ways. But the radical answer is to say no. Genesis also tells us that nature itself, the earth, is fundamentally fallen and broken. And the scriptures also tell us, and the witness of the church, that just as human nature has been restored in Christ and through his sacrifice and resurrection and at his coming again will be perfected, so too the heavens and the earth, there'll be a new heaven and a new earth, will be perfected. But we don't live in that perfection now. And so you can't heal the problems of nature. And then added to that, and this is where I'll be a bit more controversial, there's also a healthy dose of Rousseauian thinking in this, that somehow, his idea of the noble savage, so that somehow before Westernism or Christianity, which is basically the same thing, before that came into these previously what we call indigenous, we forget that we're indigenous too, just to different places, but these indigenous places, that somehow they were perfect, and the influx of Western civilization and Christianity wrecked it and destroyed it, and I don't believe that for a second. I mean, it caused damage in as much as human nature is fundamentally flawed, and therefore we brought all of our flaws with us. But actually, what was going on before was not any better. It was still made up of people with a fallen human nature who were grasping after God earnestly, but in a less precise way. And so, I just want to name that. I've not got any solution to this. I just want to name it to say the idea that sort of pre-Christian was better is a not true and a very bad way to think about things, and leads to all sorts of terrible consequences politically and spiritually within your own life as well. And the idea that we can heal the world through human ingenuity and action is ignoring the roots of the Christian faith, the Jewish faith, the Islamic faith. In fact, many shamanic faith systems as well, including Aboriginal ones here in Australia, it ignores the fact that there's an acknowledgement that nature itself is flawed, and that's why we're not supposed to worship nature. We can be inspired by it, we can see God in it, but we mustn't make it a god, because it's fallen just like human beings are.
Well, you make some good points there, because I can definitely say, historically speaking, okay, the reason, at least in this country, okay, there's lots of controversy with colonization and, you know, what happens with the Native Americans and everything else. And there's no question great atrocities occurred there. No question about it. However, that being said, great atrocities were occurring here before the white man ever got to this place, because these different tribes were basically killing each other on a regular basis, maybe not with the same sophistication that we had available to us with our technology.
And very brutally.
Yes, very brutally. Yeah, I mean, quite honestly, I mean, more so in Central and South America than even what we saw in North America. I mean, I actually have Iroquois blood in me. The Iroquois were very brutal. They're a vicious tribe, okay? Horrible things were done. Probably how I ended up with it, because there was probably people being stolen and people getting raped, and I mean, and then now it's in my ancestral bloodline. But the fact of the matter is, that doesn't make them better. And nobody was actually on this continent first. Everyone traveled here. Everyone came here. And honestly, I can say with confidence, human nature being what it is, and the fact that we are all equal, means that we're equally flawed and equally fallen, as Father Chris pointed out very eloquently there, which means that if they had the technology that we had at that point in time, there's no question that they would have gone across to Europe and probably wiped out every European in the same way that we get accused of here. So,
although one might conject that actually the technology follows still imperfect but better thinking.
I mean, you could argue that.
In other words, the necessary conditions for creating something like the technology that existed that allowed us to sail across seas is actually dependent on, well, you actually need a high trust society in order to be able to have the luxury to do that, because in low trust societies, you're too busy trying to make sure the government or your neighbor doesn't murder you, gathering food and shelter and clothing and all the rest of it. In high trust societies where those things are, in a sense, taken for granted that you're going to be safe, that's when you have the space to be creative, and that's what then leads to technological advances.
Well, it is about leisure time. Honestly, it really does come down to facilitating
so that's an anthropological answer, by the way.
It
not
is.
Theological.
No, it's definitely anthropological because, I mean, really, when you look at it, what were the two great empires of the ancient world? It was the Roman Empire and China. The ancient Chinese, not this communist crap that we have today.
The Greeks might have something to say about that, but the Roman Empire really was Greek.
Greco-Roman. I mean, the Romans kind of took over. The Romans kind of took over Greece and kind of integrated them as they did. So I kind of consider that to be all kind of one and the same over there. But the fact of the matter is, when you consolidate and then you create sophisticated ways of living, then there's time to think about things like building new ideas and technology. And hence the point, which is why you see in the more tribal societies that were called primitive, they were looked at as primitive not because they were lesser than us or not as smart. It was really because they were not as consolidated and didn't have the free time to be able to develop ideas like we had in places like Europe and China. And
part of the reason, by the way, that the West can be held accountable for, or be seen as the bad guy in all of this, is because part of that Western civilization was in fact a criminal justice system. And so, so for example, in Australia, where it's beyond doubt that Aboriginal communities were massacred by, colonial settlers. What, to be honest, I mean, it's awful and tragic, but it's not that shocking when you look at human nature and the nature of world history. What is actually the more revealing, surprising element is the reason that you can hold in that case, the British settlers to ransom over that is because in fact we tried them. White men that killed, like the Mile Lake Massacre, which is an infamous slaughter of Aboriginals in Australia. They were arrested and tried and hanged.
Yeah,
and that's a much more sophisticated approach to life, to hold your own people accountable
that's true.
for things they do to others. And so now that also gives tools to people who have a very strange approach to history and human anthropology to then label the claim that white men were all rapacious, evil, horrible people that murdered the locals. And then the converse happens, that you then idolize this actually civilization that no one can imagine, because it no longer exists. So we can then project all wonderful things onto this thing that doesn't exist, and hold to account the ones that actually have a record of what we did, for good or real.
You make a good point, and I think it is definitely something that needs to be realized here. It's not a justification for atrocity, but what it is to understand that atrocity would have happened regardless of which way it would have gone, regardless of which group had control, because human nature is human nature, and because we're all equal, that means we're all equally fallen too. And the fact of the matter is, it's not a superiority thing. It's not a racist thing. It's just the fact that the human element is broken and needs to be fixed. And we have different solutions for that. And as a Christian, I feel that this is the best solution for that. I mean, you might disagree if you're not Christian, but if you are Christian, then you understand what I'm talking about and what Father Chris is talking about. Now, to the original question, though, I do want to just put in one clarification there. Father Chris is right. You can't. And as I kind of alluded to with, like, I couldn't go out there and like bless all of Salt Lake City and then all of a sudden the problem goes away, or if I did an exorcism on the whole city that the problem goes away. The reality is you can't, because there's just too many other elements involved, fallen human nature again, and the brokenness of creation itself. I take the Eastern and Western view that yes, the soul is damaged, but also the universe is damaged, creation is damaged. I think they're both damaged by the fall, and I can prove it, because the penalty for the fall was death that came into human nature, but yet animals and plants die now too. So that proves that creation was affected, and animals and plants did not participate in the fall. They inherited the same consequence because we damaged creation. That's why they die. And that's why I say it's not a punishment, it's a consequence, because God's not trying to punish the animals for what we did. That's not what it's about. It's truly the consequence of the broken universe now. It's all in entropy. But look, I can tell you, let me put it in a more clever way, okay? I can tell you in the 2,000 years of Christian history, more than one priest or bishop or someone, okay, blessed the ocean. The ocean is holy water now, okay? Because I'm sure in the last 2,000 years somebody did it. I think I even did it once, okay? So I know the ocean is holy water. I know
you've done a swimming pool.
I did a swimming pool once because they didn't have any vials. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna turn your whole swimming pool into holy water so that when you go swimming, that was Biggs, wasn't it? The Biggs house. Biggs. I think it was Biggs.
It wasn't Biggs.
It wasn't
Biggs, but it was a Ghost Adventures house.
I think I might have done two of the Ghost Adventures, because I think I did Biggs too. I don't know. But yes, I have done swimming pools, and I've done the ocean. And the fact of the matter is, will that mean that if a possessed person goes swimming in the ocean, that they're going to automatically react in some violent way because now it's holy water? This is just not the way things work in actual spirituality. It's about faith experience. Holy water is a mark of that faith. It's a remembrance of our own baptism. It's a sign that is facilitated. So doing these grand scale things to fix grand scale problems is not how it works. It's a pastoral thing. It's individually accomplished, and the people involved have to participate in it. You can't get a whole city to participate. You can't get a whole world to participate in it.
If you understand the water cycle, then all water on Earth has been blessed already anyway.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I don't know. Evaporation might not count. It might nullify it. It might, because it changes form. No, there's actually actual Christian philosophy behind this, metaphysics, because a lot of question has come up in what constitutes a valid sacrament, and if even in strange situations, like if the Holy Eucharist is defiled in some way, at what point is it no longer the body of Christ? And the answer to that is when it's no longer contained within its original form. Because obviously not to be gross or anything, but I mean, we eat the Eucharist as we should. It's appropriate thing, but it gets digested and turns into digestive material that gets expelled in waste. It's not Jesus at that point because it's changed form. Okay. And the same thing with holy water is that it's only as long as it's water does it contain the essence of what it is. Water vapor is not holy water. So if you were to boil holy water, the steam that comes up is not holy. By the standards of how the church has spent time actually trying to figure this stuff out with metaphysics.
Now a gas.
Yeah, I know, right? So rain is not holy water if it,
all the oceans are certainly blessed because I mean, every port city I've ever lived in, they have an annual blessing of the waters. Normally the Orthodox, they're quite keen on this sort of thing. But the Catholics and Anglicans do as well. So yeah, I mean, and which is why you can bury someone at sea, right?
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. And I mean, it's all creation anyway. So in some way, there's holiness contained within it. The fact that it still contains the reflection of God's intention.
In fact, if something contained zero holiness, it would cease to exist.
Yeah, exactly. It has to have the presence of God.
For the worst sinner.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Another thing that kind of gets people thinking is like, if I get this question often, it's like, well, if I run out of holy water and I keep a little amount, if I fill it back up, will the new amount be holy water? And so at what point can you mix and match it before it's no longer holy? So the way I kind of describe this to people is that let's remember when you're a kid, you did those little watercolor paints, with the little solid spheres, I mean, not spheres, but little ovals that you would get wet and then you could paint on paper. And then sometimes, you could dip it into water, become the color be dyed the color. You can use food coloring for this as well. So, let's say you take a vial of holy water and then put a couple of drops of blue dye in it. So now you've got blue dyed water. As you add new water to it, as long as you can see the blue dye, it's still got holy water. It still contains holy water. But when you dilute it to the point where it would no longer show the dye, then it's not anymore. That's kind of how you have to look at it. So even though we're not kind of rationalizing that with clear water, you can kind of figure out how much water you can add to something before you've now diluted it to the point where it no longer contains the essence of its original intention, which is how things stay valid. It has to be the original intention. It's always about intention when it comes to sacraments, okay? Or sacramentals in this case. Okay, that's the long answer to can the land be healed? I was not expecting that one to be a long one, but it turned into one. That's good. That's what I love about open lines, open topics. It's a lot more work for me than having a guest on who kind of does all the talking. I can just kind of sit here and ruminate. But honestly, I would never, I could never put a guest show above this one because I just enjoy the engagement so much. I really look forward to these, and you guys make it great. So, all right, April, what's our second question from the ether?
Second question is, never understood venial and mortal sin and losing salvation with a reference to Romans chapter 8.
Okay, this could be an overlap answer. We might go through the break on this one. Okay, so let's first of all talk about Romans chapter 8. Then we're going to talk about the difference between venial and mortal sin and how losing salvation is not only possible, but likely under certain conditions, okay? Because I know that a lot of Protestants and evangelicals mostly erroneously teach that once saved, always saved. There's a theological term for that. I can't remember it off the top of my head right now. But it's not correct. It's not accurate. And honestly, I don't know how you can come to this conclusion and read anything that Jesus says about this.
It's the once saved, always saved principle.
Yeah, okay, They just call it that? All right. So let's talk about Romans chapter 8. Okay, I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's a long chapter, but I'm going to read a few things. In verse 9, it says, however, you are not in... let me first start by saying, it talks about Therefore, in verse 1, therefore there is now no condemnation at all for those who are in Christ Jesus. So a lot of Protestants read that and say, oh, I believe in Jesus, so now there's no condemnation anymore. My sins are forgiven. I'm good to go forever now. As long as I believe in Jesus, I'm good to go. But in verse 9, they don't read the whole thing in context is the problem. Verse 9 says, however, you are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit, if indeed the Spirit of God dwells in you. But if anyone does not have the Spirit of Christ, he does not belong to him. And then in verse 11, but if the Spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, he who raised Christ Jesus from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies through his Spirit who dwells in you. And then in 13, it says, if you are living in accord, this is very important now, if you are living in accord with the flesh, you are going to die. But if by the Spirit you are putting to death the deeds of the body, you will live. Can you not see how that's more than faith? Can you see how that's more than just believing in Jesus, dying for your sins? You have to participate in it. If you are living in accord, that's works. It's right there in this epistle that Protestants love so much with their sola fide crap. All right, here it is. If you are living in accord with the flesh, you are going to die. That's the whole theology in one nutshell, how it's possible to lose salvation. Because if at any point you could choose to go that direction and you could believe in Jesus the whole time. Because it's not just about believing in Jesus, it's about actually doing what Jesus says. That's how you believe in him. Anybody can believe it. Like we say so many times. I think this is the third week I've said this. Father Chris says it best. Even the devil believes in Jesus. That doesn't make the devil a Christian, okay? So the fact of the matter is, if you're a Christian, that means not just you believe, but that you're willing to do what it takes to be a Christian, which means you're willing to live.
I was hungry and you fed me. I was naked and you clothed me. Yep. I was in prison and you visited me.
Exactly.
It's in the gospel as well. Yep. Jesus said these words.
Yep.
And so the idea that, also it makes you your own savior. because if all it relies on is my intellectual, psychological granting of permission to acknowledge that Jesus is Lord, then have I been saved by Christ or have I saved myself? Mm-hmm. By the way, if it is me saving myself, how is that not a work?
That's worse than the faith and works theology, because faith and works theology understands that it's you believe in Jesus, now you do what he says.
Yeah, it's actually both and it is. I can see the temptation for people not to want to acknowledge it. But also, again, let's get radical. Let's get to the root of where this argument began, because this was never really contested in the church until Calvin, right? Mm-hmm. So this is Calvinist thinking. I shouldn't say Calvin's thinking, because there's a difference between Calvin and Calvinists. Yeah. And so I should make that distinction clear. But let's get to the root of this. The root of this was exotic and wrong practices that were going on in the life of the Catholic Church that were deeply superstitious, exploitative. The idea that you could buy your way out of purgatory, all these sorts of things were what was being addressed by Calvin and those others who were critiquing this. And so you have to see it in that context. The context is to say those things will not, though if what we mean by works are those sort of transactional free market approaches to salvation, then those works are meaningless and they will not gain you anything for salvation. So that's the real origin of this line of thinking that many Protestant communities continue on to today. That realignment took place a long time ago. You know, when Catholics, when the Orthodox, when certain Anglicans are talking about the works that are connected to faith, they're not talking about, buying Mary's breast milk and trying to get 100 years out of purgatory. We're talking about,
or worse, one of the 1,000 foreskins of the child Jesus. Right. I mean, there's a lot of those floating around somewhere.
So on that we can be of one accord. Yeah. But what Catholic? Well, what the truth is, and by the way, you don't need the Catholic Church to teach you this truth. This is like a deeply obvious concept, very simple concept actually, that what you do is deeply connected to what you believe. And so it's no good me saying I love my wife and then every day ignoring her or beating her or having absolutely no doing nothing to promote her well-being in my daily life. That would mean that when I believe I love my wife, in practice I'm doing nothing to display that love. Actually, I do not love my wife.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
right?
So and that's how it is. If we love Jesus, we'll do what he says, and the fact that we don't do what he says is the acknowledgement that we're all sinners. And beyond baptism, we need grace to forgive us of that. And Christ has, again, himself, John chapter 20, you can read it, said it. Whose sins you forgive, they're forgiven. Whose sins you retain, they're retained. Mm-hmm. It was an acknowledgement that we're all going to carry on needing to be forgiven for not living the life that Jesus calls us to. Because what he calls us to is perfection. And that's very, very difficult.
I mean, and that's also to understand that it comes through the church. This grace was designed by Christ to go through the church, not directly through him. A lot of them are like, we don't need the church. We don't need priests because I can go directly to God. But that's not how God set it up. You're not supposed to go directly to him in this way. You're supposed to go through the church because remember,
they wouldn't have their Bible if they didn't have the church.
I know, right? And you got to understand, your sins can't hurt God. Your sins hurt us. And so therefore your reconciliation has to be to your brothers and sisters, to creation itself, not to God, because he's not damaged by your sins. We all are. And that's why confession is a church thing. Forgiveness of sins is a church thing for this reason. It isn't a personal thing, okay? You're just trying to come up with excuses because you want to keep it secret. And you think that, because you're praying to something that's largely invisible to you, you think that, oh, well, God already knows, so it's okay that he knows what I've done, but I want anyone else to know, and that's not how forgiveness works, okay?
It's also not how you develop as a
No.
The aim is theosis. The aim is to be like God. And to do that, you need to be accountable to other people.
Yeah.
And in the context of the confessional, it's as secret as it's going to get. Priests take that very seriously. We'd go to jail rather than reveal what's been told to us in the confessional. And so, it's secret, but it's better than individualist, because you've got somebody who is trained in what the church teaches. Most of, I think I've said it before on the show, I think in every confession I've ever heard, I've spent as much time telling people what they were doing was not sinful as I have trying to then convince them of the basic sins of not putting God first and so often people bring terrible, horrible things. PTSD is a real thing. I know Jamie knows what I'm talking about, and so it's a real thing. People bring things that have caused them great distress, and that's genuine, but actually it wasn't their sin, and that's as releasing as anything else to hear from somebody who Christ has put in authority, not because of their special. That's, in fact, it's exactly the whole point. Jesus chose fishermen, tax collectors, like the least qualified people, to say, I'm going to give them my authority.
I know, right?
Like, that's how it works. It's precisely because I'm not a professor that people can confess to me.
You would not believe, well, Father Chris, you would, but the average layperson out there would not believe, this audience would not believe, how many people come to me in the confessional and confess a sin that is not really their fault, their culpability. And then, the confessor becomes an instrument of healing, because I can tell them, you did nothing wrong here. There's nothing for you to confess. It's not on you.
That's when you turn into therapist hat.
I know, right? Yeah. Well, there's a lot of therapy that goes on in the confessional. Okay, we're at the top of the hour. We're going to come back here and finish this question about the difference between venial and mortal sin and how that applies to losing salvation. Don't go away.
in the drifting through the winter light. Hunger as well as rolling me beneath the tide. Always rolling deep with the drive. I'm on a ride. Free one time when the music played, the door light bright. Those times we lose it all, like dancing through the night in the vibrant tones of our dreams, making us live again. Level bound, unleash the feeling bars when we're playing in perfect harmony in the blue, blushed with the dawn. When the mist of things that meet the night, in the hour, the eye that chases sunrise those times we move light-hearted. Let's drop just enough to go free one time when the path begins to decide. Free one time when the dawn is on its way. Let that be the beast of sweet and light. Hope we're just enough. Free one time when the night through the pieces of the sun, late night up in the smoke. Free one time when the dawn begins inside my life. Free one
Welcome back, everyone, to the second hour of Vestiges After Dark. We will now move into more questions. Some more from the ether, some from the chat, and some for those of you who are brave enough to call into the show at 207-544-1983. That's 207-544-1983. You can also text that number, and we can get questions that way. But we would prefer to hear your voice. So think about it. Otherwise, the moderators will find your question wherever you put it, okay? Don't go away. More to come. All right, so the second part of that question had to do with not understanding venial and mortal sin. So this is, again, a pretty particularly Catholic thing. Even Orthodox really don't do these kinds of designations. And honestly, it's more of a philosophical divide. The fact of the matter is, all sin is sin. There really isn't one that is worse than another, as far as all of them carry the penalty or the consequence, as I said earlier, of death. Okay, all sin, even from the most insignificant thing, at least from our standpoint, to the greatest thing. From our standpoint again, all results in death. So in a way, it really doesn't matter which one's worse, because that's a human judgment system that has more to do with how we view physical justice as opposed to the perfection of God, which anything that is short of that perfection is, short of that perfection, imperfect, and therefore everything imperfect has to go. All right, so either it's destroyed in the fires of hell, whatever that means to you, or it's perfected completely in purgatory and salvation. Okay, so this is again ways of trying to explain it, not to come up or create different theologies, or the church wasn't trying to add to an already complex issue. It was trying to make it easier to understand. Okay, and this is where this stuff comes from. So to understand what venial and mortal sin is, we have to first understand what a sin really is. And that's how we lose salvation, okay? Because it's not just about believing in Jesus. It's about doing what Jesus says. Jesus leads us closer and closer to perfection. So the more that we aspire to be like Christ, the more perfect we become. The less we spend our time doing that, the more sinful we become. That's just the nature of the entropic condition that we call the fallen cosmos, or the fallen nature. All right, so venial sin is that sin which is the ordinary, I don't want to call it just wrongdoing, because it's anything anything that's a product of imperfection that damages our own imperfection. Okay, does not separate us or disconnect us from God, but it does damage us. It damages the cosmos, and so this is the things that people tend to sort of, and I guess it's not completely wrong to say it this way, more of the regular day-to-day things that you do wrong. Maybe the lie that you told because you were too tired and didn't want to, if being honest would have required too much work, so you just lied about it. Maybe it was like some other thing that you did. Mortal sin is called mortal sin because this is the sin that completely disconnects you from God, and that needs to be reconciled in order for you to return to a state of grace. So in a sense, it cuts you off from the grace that saves you. Therefore, it puts you in danger of hell from the Catholic theological standpoint. But in order for something to be mortal, it has to meet certain criteria. There's 3 very specific criteria that determines whether a sin is mortal. First of all, it has to be a grave matter, okay? And this is where the designations come from, where venial sin seems like, oh, it's the lesser stuff, the day-to-day stuff, whereas the mortal sin's the big deal, like rape and murder and stuff like that, which is true. And that is because of the grave matter. So the more serious the condition is, the more likely it is of moving towards something that could damage your relationship to the grace that you need in order to find salvation. So why is this? Is it because God gets mad at you and he cuts you off? No. It's because you make yourself too imperfect for the grace of the Holy Spirit to reside within you in that particular way. And the more imperfect you become, the less that the perfection of God can actually reside within you. Now, of course, the base nature is always there. We're made in God's image. We exist. Therefore, God is present. But the grace is not. The grace requires a certain amount of participation for it to work. And this is what I mean when I say cultivate grace. It's not that I'm saying that, you can earn it. I'm saying cultivate grace because if you're not using it, it's a free gift. It's always a free gift. You can't do anything to deserve it. But if you're not using it, if you're not cultivating it, then it doesn't do anything for you. And so therefore, the more imperfect you are, the less you're using it, right? Because that's where the imperfection comes from. So grave matter is that. Now, the second thing that's required for mortal sin is full knowledge. You have to know it's a grave matter for it to work. This is where culpability comes in. Now, culpability can take a very grave matter and make it a venial sin. It can. If you don't know that what you've done is a grave matter, then you're not culpable in the same way as someone who does know it's a grave matter. So where would this fall in? Well, let's say a person's intellectually challenged in a way, or has some kind of deficiency where they don't understand the world as a person with an average IQ would, and maybe does something horrendous, but didn't really understand what they were doing. Well, because they don't really understand what they're doing, even though it is still sin, it's still imperfect, it still harmed someone, it still harmed the cosmos, it doesn't damage their access to the grace of God, because they didn't really know what they were doing was as serious as it was, okay? And then the third condition is deliberate consent. Now, this is the real sticky one for some theologians in the church, and it has led to a lot of debates and a lot of controversies, and I'll explain that in a moment here. The consent part is the hard thing, because in some ways one could almost philosophically say, and I happen to be one of those people, Father Chris might disagree, but I happen to be one of those people that says, do we really ever truly consent to anything? I mean, are we ruled by some conscious motivations and influences that are just operating below the surface? Now, yeah, we're culpable in the sense that we should be better mindful of these things and we should guard against them, but human nature is so flawed that sometimes being tired or exhausted or just not giving a shit because you had a bad day can lead to a type of apathy that can sort of almost operate on its own. And so a lot of human behavior is almost automatic, and automatic behavior can be dangerous, can lead to imperfect actions, but it's not necessarily deliberate consent either. And so one of my mentors in the church, he was a pastor emeritus of a big parish. He taught me everything that I really know about everything that I know. And he was a very influential guy in my life, long since dead now. But he was old when I knew him. But he believed that we can't really deliberately give our consent to anything because we're too enslaved by the original sin. And that the original sin still controls us to the degree that we're not really consenting to anything that goes on. So he would argue that mortal sin is almost impossible to commit. There are those in the church that actually do hold this view. They're not condemned for it. It's a valid argument. There are those, though, that say, nah, not so fast. You can still be fully consensual to the things that you did in a condition, like a situation where, you let your emotions get the best of you and you go and harm someone and, maybe they end up dead. That's mortal sin because you consented to it. You knew what you were doing. You grabbed the gun. You shot him. You can't just blame your emotions for being, you're a crime of passion kind of thing. And there's a lot of different variables that are at work here. But the point is that those three conditions conditions need to be met. Now, the church doesn't sit around, and the confessor doesn't sit around in confession going through each and every one of these and saying, "Ooh, wait a second. Let's evaluate this. Were you fully consensual? Did you understand what you're doing?" They're not going to put you on trial when you go into the confessional with your sins, okay? That's between you and God, and this is where the great and powerful examination of conscience comes in, because what you have to do is you have to go through and reflect before, preferably your confession, what you've done. And this is why in the, in Mass, we say the great words, what we have done, what we've failed to do, because sometimes what you fail to do is actually the greater sin than actions that you've done. Sometimes failing to do what you're expected to do, what you're required to do as a Christian is the sin. And this is a situation where when you examine your conscience, you're able to, hopefully, if you're doing it right, if you're doing it sincerely, able to be more mindful of those things so that you understand when you consent to actions that are truly wrong and can damage your relationship to God to the point that his grace can't reach you because you've pushed it out. Remember, it's not God cutting you off, it's you cutting God off. That's the difference. God doesn't send you to hell, you send yourself to hell because of this, okay? So whether you like the terms venial sin, mortal sin, and whether or not you like the idea that you can lose your salvation, the fact of the matter is these are all real things. Don't use the word mortal sin if you don't want to, but these three conditions still exist. Culpability still exists. And you can't hold someone accountable who doesn't truly understand what they're doing, right? It's not their fault entirely. And human nature is broken. So there's only so much we can do. That's where institutional sin comes in. That's a whole different conversation about how sometimes to put it very briefly, institutional sin is the idea that by virtue of living in this world, you're going to have to sin at some point. That the world is going to make you sin by virtue of you having to get through, and surviving requires a certain amount of sin. That surviving requires a certain amount of imperfection to do it. Think about it. Can you really tell the truth in all situations and not create absolute havoc all the time? Sometimes you can't, okay? Bearing false witness sometimes is necessary because it's the lesser evil of two greater evils. You just don't know all of the conditions. Only God knows that, and this is where confession becomes so liberating, because this is understood. Christ knows this. This is why it's understood we're all sinners, because we know that, and he knows we're here. We really kind of stuck having to do this, and he understands a lot of that's not our fault, which is why he dies for our sins and why he provides the grace of salvation and why that's so easily accessible and why it doesn't require any work. It's completely given freely as a gift, okay? But you have to participate in it. You have to cultivate it. You have to use it, okay? So that's I don't know. I guess that was a long answer, but Father Chris, anything you want to add to mortal sin, venial sin, anything I might have said?
So I want to go back on do we ever really truly consent to our sins? Obviously, I think yes, we do. I think
in all situations, though.
Not of course not.
Yeah.
But the idea that if somebody strangles his wife, that somehow, was it really mortal sin? I don't think we need to have a debate about that. I think we know that it's mortal sin. So and certainly from the Romantic period onwards, we get Frankenstein's monster and this idea that human beings are just machines, and that's been sort of supplanted by psychoanalysis and all of these things have their place. But look, we know if we're manipulating things to suit ourselves, to let ourselves off the hook. Mm-hmm. So we know that. Mm-hmm. And I think if you're aware of that, then you're in mortal sin. I accept that not there are some people without the intellectual capacity to form that. And the other thing I wanted to say was, for all, because this is really a polemic against Catholics from Protestants about, how can you separate sins into venial and mortal? Well, the modern Western world was largely shaped by Protestant Christians, right? I think we can mainly agree on that. Mm-hmm. And yet, we distinguish in the criminal justice system between people that go through a red light and people that murder people, okay? Mm-hmm. So one is dealt with summarily at a lower court and normally involves a fine or some kind of penalty point. The other is dealt with, in my case, the Crown Court. I don't know what the equivalent is, but a higher court in America, where the penalty can be life imprisonment or death. So the criminal justice system absolutely reflects the difference between venial and mortal sin. And also the scriptures do as well. John chapter 5, verse 16 is where the Pharisees are scolding Jesus' disciples for let me get this exactly, because for doing things on the Sabbath, for picking corn.
Yeah, right.
In fact, Jesus himself for healing people on the Sabbath, right?
Yeah.
And so, there you've got a difference between a venial and a mortal sin. You know?
And I think another way to look at it, maybe that might be helpful, is that you could look at venial sin as being just the human. The built-in human imperfection from original sin. Mortal sin is going out of your way to accentuate those imperfections. You could look at it that way. Okay, yeah. So if you don't,
by the way, the church teaches that venial sin is dealt with at the Mass. You know,
yes, that's the general absolution, right? The general absolution, yeah.
The general absolution is sufficient to absolve.
And Eucharist too.
Sin.
Eucharist actually removes all venial sin anyway. So even if you miss the general absolution, reception of the Eucharist cleanses you, and that's because Christ washes it out, but not mortal sin.
And that's why, I mean, this literally happened to a friend of mine. It's kind of amusing, although not great pastoral practice. That on Ash Wednesday one year, he was at this massive church in London, and he was the only priest on duty. On Ash Wednesday, a lot of people come to make their confession, and he had a sign up outside the confessional saying, "One priest on duty today, mortal sins only."
Yeah, no time for the venial stuff. You should be taking care of that at Mass.
Because it is, now from a pastoral point of view, it's kind of okay to talk about venial sin.
Yeah, because people do sometimes bring it up.
Yeah, and it's fine. But yeah, when times of the confessional is for mortal sin, and we all know what they are. Like, well, put it this way.
Not everyone. There's Catholics that still think that missing Mass on Sunday is not a mortal sin.
Oh yeah, which is a sin of scruples, of course.
Yeah.
Well, missing mass deliberately on Sunday is a mortal sin.
Oh yeah. Saying I don't want to go today, I don't feel like going. Not getting dispensation.
That is a mortal sin.
Yeah, that's mortal sin.
So another way, like to go back to your grave matter and intention. Here's an example for you. So pre-Christian America, before the gospel got there, all people are orientated towards God and towards worship of God. Therefore, if in sincerity they're worshiping God as God has been revealed to them, then they're not committing mortal sin in not missing Mass on Sunday, right?
Right.
They're incapable of committing that mortal sin. Once the truth is more deeply revealed to you, this is why, by the way, Christians should be the least judgmental people on planet Earth. The more you know, the higher your own standard, and therefore the more forgiving you have to be of people that are not in a fuller state of awareness of who God is and what God has done for you. And so all of a sudden now, with the full revelation of Christ, I now know missing Mass on Sunday is a mortal sin.
Well, see, that's an interesting part that you get into there, because just think about the average Christian, these Westboro, Baptist church people that are out there just,
I would argue they're not really Christians.
Well, they would argue that they are.
They're Trinitarian.
And let's just say that I agree with you, Jamie, but let's just say for the sake of argument that they see themselves as another denomination legitimate of Christianity.
Oh, they do.
And they feel justified in this, but with this judgment, completely ignoring Matthew chapter 7, as I've said before. But could one argue? I would say no. Could one argue that this is largely ignorance on their part, which would lower their culpability? But see, the fact of the matter is, yes, I would say, yes, you're not wrong. They are ignorant and they are not really truly understanding what they're doing. However, that being said, a Christian doesn't get to use that excuse because the information is very available. And if you actually read the Bible that you claim that you want to protect so much, you certainly know they certainly know the homosexual verses, don't they? So why don't they understand Matthew chapter 7? Judge, so that you won't be judged. The fact of the matter is, you can only take ignorance so far. If you are intentionally using using your own convictions, avoiding certain information because it's inconvenient, well, that doesn't excuse you, and it does not lower your culpability. Even if you can claim ignorance, it's not the kind of ignorance that lowers culpability.
And this is why St. John Chrysostom's, we sanitize his quote into, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? But
right. Yeah.
What he actually said was the road to hell is paved with the skulls of bishops and the signposts are the bones of faithless priests. Because, and that emphasizes the point you're making, because actually, what excuse do they have?
None.
Like the priests, bishops, faithful Christians are far more susceptible to mortal sin because we know the standard.
Yeah, we have,
and if you know the standard
to the data,
and don't meet it, you're in mortal sin.
Yeah. All right, April. What's our next question?
I have a question about what y'all just talked about, if I could.
Yeah.
So, what if you have a person who starts doing a behavior that they know is sinful, but they do it long enough that they think there's nothing wrong with it anymore?
Well, I mean, look, if they're claiming Christianity as their faith, then again, the same applies to what we just said, is that there's only so much ignorance you can claim when the data is readily available and you're just choosing to ignore it. That becomes a consensual issue. So that's kind of like free consent, overriding the fact or using as a loophole the ignorance factor to try to protect you from the mortal sin. And we really can't do that because the information's too readily available for Christians to understand what Christ expects of us. If you're reading your gospel, and failing to read the gospels and claiming to be a Christian, I'd argue that's a mortal sin too, because that's disingenuous. That's a pretender.
Now that we can read, now that we're if we're in a nation where we're taught to read, where we have access to these things.
Yes, 1,000 years ago, maybe you could have argued it, but I don't think you can today.
Yeah.
Or
if you're illiterate today, then okay.
Yeah.
You're not
illiterate.
But that doesn't exempt you. That's even more the reason to take your full life in the participation of the church.
Hey, James Earl Jones has a wonderful Bible, an oral Bible. You can buy that and listen to that. So even if you're illiterate, there's still not an excuse for not knowing the Bible.
I would love to have Darth Vader read the Bible to me.
Oh, go get it.
Awesome.
I think it's still available. I think you can still get that. Yeah. It's not cheap, but it's out there. Darth Vader.
I would say it's kind of like when you tell a lie so many times that you start to believe it, but it's still a lie.
Delusion does not protect you. I mean, mental illness might protect it might lower your culpability, but intentionally choosing to be delusional by avoiding the information that might challenge your understanding of the faith that you claim to believe in, I don't know. I think
this is deeply related to that, really great quote. I believe, help my unbelief.
Yeah. It's
like
true.
that is the nugget of all of it. And human beings are really good at doing two things that are very harmful. One is convincing ourselves that what we're doing is fine when it's not. And the other thing is the opposite, is the scruples of convincing ourselves that we're beyond redemption.
Yeah.
Both of those things are terrible sins.
It's just as bad in a lot of ways, because again, that's kind of, you're getting into sort of like the blasphemy of the Holy Spirit there.
And it's pride. It's pride.
Yeah.
There's Jesus hanging on the cross.
I'm so bad. I'm the worst of them all. I'm so bad. That makes me special, so special that even God can't save me. I mean, that's exactly what you're saying.
And people, in common parlance, to say, "Oh, if I walked into your church, I'd smoke."
Oh, I've heard that one.
I'm like, people say it all the time to me. I'm like,
walls
you're not
would
that
cave
special.
in, yeah.
I know, you're not that special, not that important.
You're not that special.
You're only important in terms of the fact that God loves you and wants to save you, and that's all the importance that you need. But as far as like trying to make yourself out to be something that's so unique that even God can't touch you is ridiculous, So April, I think in that particular case, it's walking a very, very fine line, and I would say that person
dangerous.
Should not be playing that game if they really do profess Christianity. Now, if they don't profess Christianity, then that changes the dynamic completely. But a person that professes Christianity does not have an excuse for for thinking that they've been doing something for so long that they now think it's okay. That's not, because it doesn't change the scriptures. It doesn't change what Christ taught. It doesn't change what the magisterium teaches about what Christ taught. It doesn't change the apostolic tradition. It doesn't change what the fathers of the church gave us or handed on to us. All of that stays the same, regardless of what we want to believe in. That's the sin of solipsism, is really what that is.
And to keep ourselves willfully ignorant is to go against our nature. Because God has created us to be like him, and that means to be endlessly curious. And so if we think, oh, I won't be too curious about that because it might mean I'll have to sacrifice something, then actually we're already in the sin.
Yeah, we are.
We're already there. And the great thing is, I mean, I've said this before, and you alluded to it a second ago, Bishop Bryan. Mm-hmm. The most important truth about the incarnation, the sacrifice, the resurrection of Jesus Christ is we're allowed to risk living.
Yeah.
The whole point is you can risk, because the greatest sin is the unlived life. The fact that sins can be forgiven tells you can risk living. So risk it. Be curious. Find out more. And yet the burdens will weigh up on you. And the good news is that Christ is not equally sharing those burdens. He is doing, 99.99% of the lifting, and you're yoked to him. And the church is there to say, okay, you screwed that up. Dust you off. Carry on.
Do better.
Yeah, do better.
And not dust you off and don't do that again. Don't take risks. Dust you off so you can carry on taking risks. Calculated.
Take a lesson and carry on.
There you go, April. There you go. So what's our next one?
Next question comes from Rex, and it says, I have a question about the recent new release of UAP UFO evidence. Why are they saying this will cause panic in the streets, especially among Christians, and make them question their faith?
Okay, so I want to preface this one by saying that next week's episode is completely on this topic in detail. We're going to spend all 3 hours on it, okay? And it's just us. We're not bringing in a guest. I'm going to give a presentation on this very topic. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this one right now because next week is all about it. But I will say, to just answer the question in a satisfactory way for tonight, it becomes problematic for three predominant reasons. Number one, you've got high-level officials like the vice president and other members of Congress making claims that they believe these things are demons. Okay, when you have that kind of terminology being used by the highest levels of the government, well, that's going to unsettle people, particularly since they're not qualified to make that kind of determination. And that's not an opinion they should be sharing as a public official. I think that's very irresponsible of Vance, because I did read more. I mean, at first I defended him, and then as I read more about it and saw more about what he's talked about it subsequently, I think he does believe that these are demons, and that's absolutely ridiculous.
Well, he's influenced by Michael Knowles because he's friends with him, and that's Michael Knowles' take on it. Generally.
Well, there's that, and then there's that other exorcist too. There's that other exorcist that we've talked about makes that claim. So yeah, go ahead. But I want to finish what I was saying about the three things
I'll just make one more prerequisite. Okay? Yeah. This is a strangely American obsession. Honestly, no one else in the world gives a shit about this stuff. and
a few Americans don't give a shit in the world.
I can say in Europe, Britain, Australia, I've never met anybody that wasn't an American that even thinks about this stuff or would in any way give two hoots whether it was alien life form or not. And if it deeply shakes your Christian faith, the possibility of alien life forms, I think you need to read it again. You need to read the scriptures again. It wouldn't change my faith one dot.
Me either.
So back to the question, and the first point that I'm making is that when you have high-level officials saying that they think they're demons, it's just one step away from a type of dispensationalism. where there are a large number, and maybe this is part of the American exception, or American obsession, rather, that Father Chris is referring to, because it is such a problem here, this dispensationalism, this Antichrist end times theology that has been, really taken root here in a way that it's hard to find someone who doesn't believe some form of it. But, when they're thinking in a lot of ways that this is it. This is the end times. The demons are coming, and this is what they were all along. And it's a great deception because the aliens are going to come and promise all these good things, and it's going to be the Antichrist, leading all of us astray.
And of course, America's the center of all of that. I mean,
yeah.
Where else would the aliens want to go?
Yeah, right.
Well, I mean, that's the thing is, we'll talk about that next week where some of that might be true, because there are those in government right now. I follow this very closely, as a lot of you know, and there are those in government right now. This is the first time I've ever would imagine, because it's been in the realm of conspiracy theory for decades, and now I'm hearing people that work for the government on major news networks saying this, but they're basically saying that the U.S. government made a deal years ago with them that involves the research and utilizing of genetics and other things. We'll go into the detail. I don't want to go that far right now. We'll talk about that next week. But this is probably why people are so obsessed with it. And Americans have a very innate distrust of government. I think that's just part of the American spirit. And so this is something that has been very much not talked about. This is the first time there's been any kind of disclosure, and most people are arguing this is hardly the disclosure that we deserve. But before, it used to be like, oh, you're silly. It's like, it was like believing in leprechauns or something. Now people are taking it seriously because there are things going on out there. And again, we'll talk about that next week. That's the first thing. Okay, first thing, you got high-level people talking about demons, which leads people to worry about the end times, and that can create panic with some people. Okay, so the second thing is that if your worldview, again, this goes to these dispensationalists, these evangelicals, and certain branches of Protestantism, if your entire theology is based upon the literal, historical absolutisms of Scripture, where every single thing in there is a historical event that happened in time exactly the way it's reported, well, you're going to have a problem if you believe that God created, the heavens and the earth in 7 actual days, and that, it only talks about human beings being his ultimate creation, intelligent life being on another planet, maybe not so much. That could shatter. And then there's other officials that we'll talk about next week that were on major news networks this past week talking about how they've got proof, apparently, or they could prove it if they were allowed to release it, which is another problem here, is that there's still some question about why that is, and, arguments on both sides of the fence about why. But this person and several others were claiming that they created us, that they really are. They created our religions. They created us from their own DNA stock by combining it with other, almost like a zoo. And if you're a Christian, believing that God created you, this could contradict that worldview if you're very literal about it. Okay. Now the Vatican has answers. We'll talk about what the Vatican said, and they're not anywhere near as concerned about this as the dispensationalists and evangelicals are. But that's to be expected, because of course that's they see the Catholic Church as the Church of the Antichrist anyway, because of all those upside down crosses of St. Peter, right? Anyway. So that's the second issue. And the third issue, I think, is that it could, if it's true, if what's being said about it is true or turns out being true, life as we understand it will never be the same again. There's no question that interacting with a super advanced species that wants to involve themselves with us. And let's just take the best case scenario and say it's actually benevolence, that they're not here for any malicious reasons or ulterior motives. Let's just say it's really because it's like, okay, you've reached the point of your evolution where, we don't want you to destroy yourself, so we're going to come and help. And let's say that's an honest reason. Let's say they're really good intentioned and they're capable. Let's say they're capable of actually carrying that out in a sincere way, because maybe they're not as broken as human beings are. Maybe they've had another billion years to advance. And so, wrongdoing and selfishness are not a thing that they contend with like we do. Maybe they, not primate. They don't derive from primates, which are typically very violent and selfish creatures. And so maybe they're from a different type of stock. We can come up, let's just say best case scenario. All the intentions are good. Our existence is going to change. Our worldview is going to change, because even though we've moved beyond, the criticisms of the church, condemning Galileo for saying that the Earth is not the center of the universe and that the sun actually does not revolve around it.
The dominant historical assumptions around that are very flawed as well.
I know they are, but I mean, it did.
The church has been a progenitor of science,
yes,
pro-science.
But there was a problem with that claim at the time. There was, and
it was mainly because Galileo, the personality, was a bit of an asshole.
Yes. Well, I mean, okay, that's possible. But the thing is that even though we've moved beyond it. However you want to, understand what happened there historically, and we can even talk about that next week in more detail for people that might be interested in it. But the fact is, regardless of that, the church still operates as though it's the center of the universe, that humanity is the center of creation. And the theology kind of sort of reinforces that. So how do we reconcile within the worldview, particularly if you don't have the teachings of the magisterium on this? Protestants don't care about that. Evangelicals think it's evil. Dispensationalists don't care. The fact is, how are you to reconcile without that help? Why would there be this more highly advanced species that's so much better than we are? Maybe not even fallen. Maybe they didn't even fall. Imagine that, if that's a possibility. If we're the pinnacle of creation, then that kind of contradicts that and kind of weakens this egocentric view that we have of ourselves, and a theology that sort of reinforces that egocentrism. So these are the three reasons that it could cause panic. Do I think it's going to cause panic? No, I do not. I really don't. Maybe with some groups, because they're going to be like, this is the Antichrist, this is a government deception, this is Project Blue Beam, whatever they call it. That's possible. But I really think that the average American is an adult. I think the average citizen of Earth is also mature enough to say, all right, well, this is a discovery of science, a fascinating thing. There's been a lot of speculation for years. Now we know. But what are they here for? Are they here for good reasons? If not, well, we need to protect ourselves against that. If they are, well, then, I personally think that they're not here on. If they are here, I don't think they're here on evil intentions, because I think they could have destroyed us a long time ago if they wanted to. Certainly, if you have the technology to get here.
Going back to the logic that I was, drawing out earlier, which is actually the civilizations that reached the point where they could go out colonizing other peoples, had reached a certain level of development that they had to have reached in order to have the resources to do what they did. And I think so. There's an extension of that. But if I might offer an historical critique of this, I would say, and I'm going to sound very English now, a nation that was founded on a rebellion is always fearful of the next rebellion.
Yeah, that's the biggest deficit to
France.
You're right.
So
that's the biggest deficit to America. It's its undoing sometimes.
Because America is so for a long time that was checked by the British Empire, right? It might come back and burn the White House again, right?
Yeah.
So the rebellion was terrestrial. The threat of overthrow was terrestrial. Well, now America is the hegemonic superpower of planet Earth, so there is, in a sense, no terrestrial threat to it in the short term anyway.
Yeah.
And so you have to find one from outside. So that's just a historical critique of what happens in why this might be a thing.
I think so. And I mean, the Pope yesterday, in fact, released the newest papal encyclical called the Magnifica Humanitas. And it deals with the ethics of AI. And I think a lot of people might be surprised that while there's a large amount of caution in there, it wasn't as though we should completely get rid of it and throw it away and abandon all progress because it could cause too much problem. It was actually not teaching that. It was just teaching that as we advance with it, it needs to be done responsibly and should not be in the hands of a select few elites who have complete and utter control over it, which I am in actual firm agreement with. I found myself agreeing with the entire encyclical, and I think the Pope was spot on with that one. If we get to the same conditions with alien life, I'm sure there'll be another one about that, and I would venture to think that the Catholic Church's position and the Pope's position is probably not going to be they're here to destroy us and this is the Antichrist coming. I think it will probably be one of curiosity, but like, reasonable caution, not being credulous, but, saying we owe it to ourselves as a civilization to explore this scientifically. The Church is, as Father Chris said, always been about that. So we will talk in far more detail about that next week. So if you're interested in that topic, don't forget to tune in next week, Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern, where I will discuss all the issues and how the Church and how Christians should approach this with rationality. Okay? All right, April, what's our next one?
The next one is, does the Catholic Church acknowledge the stone tape theory?
Okay, stone tape theory, for those that are not familiar with it, is basically the idea in the paranormal field that teaches that stone, and some say even wood, can store the recordings of past events, almost as if it's like a type of organic tape recorder that can contain the essence of events that occur within proximity of these things. The whole idea of the New Age metaphysics around crystals is largely based upon a very similar thing, that crystals absorb energy, rocks, certain ones absorb certain types of energy, that kind of thing. No, the Church does not adhere to any of that. It would be considered probably superstitious. I would say that they would probably argue it would be a superstitious position that is.
We do have relics.
We have relics, but they're not. They're not recording. They contain grace, but they're not like recording events and holding traumas and causing hauntings and stuff like that. I have a lot of relics. I've never seen any hauntings around them. I definitely seen a lot of grace around them, though. That's for sure. So I would say that I would very much argue that. It's not a necessary belief system, even in terms of the paranormal. Does it happen? I do think energy can be contained. I don't think it's necessarily the rocks themselves that contain the energy. I think everything contains energy. Anything can absorb energy, and if it's traumatic enough, everything in that vicinity contains the essence of that trauma. And if it's a good thing, then everything in the vicinity of that good thing contains that good thing. I don't think it has to be rock or stone. So, but the Church doesn't have a position on that at all. It would probably see it as superstitious, honestly. So that's the answer to that one. Okay, we can probably start now getting to all of the questions that are in the chat right now for those of you who have asked them. So who would like to give us our first one?
I'll go with Timothy's, April. Timothy started off with a question specifically for Father Chris. What are the cultural differences between Australia and England, both culturally and religiously?
That's a good question. The differences are greater than I anticipated they would be. I thought England was and is a deeply secular country, but it was nothing compared to Australia. So, I mean, gosh, I could do a show on this, so I'll keep it really brief. What a great question. I'll give you a really simple example, right? The FA Cup final is the most English thing possible. Well, amongst the most English things possible, right? It's the FA Cup final. It's a competition every single registered football club in the whole of England and parts of Wales can enter, whether you're a pub team or Manchester United. And it's a knockout competition. So in theory, you know, it's the sort of like you have any man can become president. Well, any man could lift the FA Cup, you know, if he played for the right team. So the FA Cup final is a culturally significant. It's so culturally significant that actually they won't monetize it, so it's always shown on free-to-air television by law. Before the FA Cup final, even now, which is quite remarkable when you think about it, they sing the hymn "Abide with Me." Okay. Now, "Abide with Me" happens to be one of my favorite hymns. It is deeply Christian. It's obviously been used a lot as a funeral hymn, but it's an explicitly and deeply theologically Christian hymn. Now, most people there singing it probably don't go to church, don't even think it's just become a cultural sort of thing. So I'm not saying this is proof positive that English people are all faithful Christians, but it's there. It's a bit of a remnant, but it's still there and it's still sung. There is no equivalent to that in Australia. Their most sacred day, in secular terms, is Anzac Day, where they remember the fallen at Gallipoli, and you know, because it's tied in with how Australia became a nation independent of being separate colonies of the British Empire. So it's tied in with all sorts of things. And I presided at a lot of these as a priest. I'm the only thing there that's religious. Everything else, raising and lowering flags, even the national anthem has no reference to God in it whatsoever. And so I could do a show on it. There's a very simple, the thought that they'd sing a hymn at a rugby league, which should be the equivalent here, rugby league game, the State of Origin match, you know, there'd be an outcry if that happened. So there's a fundamental different approach to the place of religiosity between England and Australia, and the other major difference, sort of culturally, is, you know, I'm indigenous to England. Most Australians are in fact ethnically English or German or mainly English, Irish, Scots, Welsh. But obviously there is an indigenous people here. And so that's a tension that doesn't exist. Different cultural tensions exist in Britain about people who've come into England. And I do find it, and I'm going to be very naughty now and say I find this amusing, that in countries like Australia, indigenous rights are really important because they're seen as the weaker of the two halves. In England, indigenous rights are seen as far right crazy because, of course, the dominant culture in Britain is white. So just an interesting difference that happens in human responses to. So there's two quick differences, but I could write a book about it.
All right, there you go. You know what? Let's go ahead and take our top of the hour break now, a little early, before we get into another question, because we'll have an overlap, and this way it's clean, okay? So go ahead, ask more of your questions in the various chat rooms or call into the show, get into the queue, and we'll be right back after this. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone, to the third and final hour of Vestiges After Dark. Sorry about that weird anomaly. I stepped away to go to the restroom, and I came back, and the switchboard was playing like 3 or 4 different songs at the same time. It's like, what the hell is it doing now? So I had to resolve that. Sorry about that. This is what happens when I get my eyes off all this stuff for one moment. If you ever like watch me and you see my eyes all over the place, looking at all these different screens, Jamie knows. You know, it's pure chaos here. I'd rather fly a 747. It's more relaxing. All right. When we come back here, more of your questions. You can call into the show, 207-544-1983. That's 207-544-1983. And you can ask your questions in the chat rooms on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. Don't go away. I have a little automated system when I step away from it that I can keep the music going in case for some reason I don't get back in time. And for some reason it decided to just play everything, almost everything that was stored in its database. I have no idea why it was doing that. But anyway, it took me a bit to get it fixed. So sorry about that. That's not one that I've seen before, but it seems like there's always something. Okay, April, what's our next question?
The next question is from Optimus Klein. I love the name. It says, a priest on TikTok that said the Jews aren't the chosen people anymore and Christians are. Doesn't God choose all of us if we choose him?
Yeah, he does. I mean, that's the thing. It's that it's not that there's no special race anymore. Humanity has been open to salvation. For those who want it, you become the chosen people. So
the only race is the human race.
Exactly. So it's not that the Jews are no longer the chosen race. It's now that it includes everyone who wants it. That's the only difference now. And so you're right. I mean, I don't. Look, what did I tell you at the beginning of this show? There's more lies and bullshit out there on social media. Don't believe it. All right. Just because you find some YouTube video and it looks somewhat interesting and somewhat believable, don't believe it. All right.
That's a direct quote from Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah. I see, I'm in good company, right? There you go.
He said, don't believe everything you read on the internet as well.
Yeah, right. Exactly right. Yeah.
I know because I Googled it.
I'm going to do, next time you do that, I'm going to have a little video, a little AI video of him actually saying it. You watch. It'll be at like the Gettysburg Address. He ends it with that.
He'll do it, Father.
I will. I will. Yeah. Yes. And Jamie gets one almost every single day.
All kinds of crazy stuff. Yeah.
I'm trying to think what he does with my image that I don't know about.
Man.
The only one I've done with yours so far is the opening for the show. That's the only one because I didn't have one that you were moving in, so I needed to make it a little more animated. And I think I did a pretty good job. But Jamie's the brunt of a lot of my attacks. I'll tell you that. Yep. All right. All right. Yeah, that's all I can.
So what was
say
the question
that.
again? I forgot. I I put myself off.
Go ahead.
It asked the Jews. Okay, there was a video on.
Oh yeah. That's right. Yeah. I mean, this obsession. Look, a lot of this comes from a very strange view of salvation that's taken root in a very niche, small group of evangelical Christians in America. So you know, again, outside, no one even thinks about this stuff. Was it important that Jesus was a Jew? Jesus was a Jew, so let's say that, yeah. Although he was an Israelite. I mean, contemporary Judaism and the Judaism of Jesus' time are not the same thing. So yes, Jesus was a Jew, but and through him we're grafted into the people of Israel. That, and by we, I mean anyone who's baptized in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So ethnicity, I mean, St. Paul says it. That's why in Christ there's neither Jew nor Gentile, slave nor free, male nor female. This is not some proto-transgenderism, as again some other strange people want to claim. This is to say that when it comes to our relationship with God, none of those incidental parts of our lives that we have no control over, whether we're male or female, whether we're Jew or Gentile, whether we're English or American, none of those things are a factor. Our salvation is because God became a human being.
Well said.
And therefore we are saved through him. Now, the Catechism does refer to Jewish people in a particular way, and the context for that is the Holocaust. The Vatican Council happens in very short order after the revelation of the Holocaust that had happened under the Nazis, and a lot of equally bad Christian polemics against Jews that had developed over 1,500, 2,000 years needed to be addressed. And so so the Catechism does refer to the people of Israel as having received the first covenant, and therefore we have a relationship with them that's fraternal rather than antithetical. But people have taken that and gone mad.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's more of that, again, that evangelical dispensational mindset. It's not a healthy worldview. Dump it. I'm serious. Dump it. It's not a healthy worldview. It's not a good
racial
Christianity.
Essentialism, is I'll use the very English. It's for the birds. It's a load of bullshit, basically.
No, it's a very destructive.
It's not going to get you what you think you are getting.
Yeah, it's very destructive. Very destructive.
I understand the damage that's happened to people that pushed them in that direction. I do understand that, but I can tell you it's not the answer.
Well, now they're the ones doing the damage, so there you go.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, what's our next question?
Next question comes from Tiffany. If you are in a known haunted location, is it dangerous to pray for dark spirits?
No, it's never dangerous to pray for anybody, but it might be a prayer done in vain. I mean, if it's truly a dark spirit in the fallen angel sense, there's nothing that your prayers are going to be able to do for them. If it is a wrathful spirit, which in my definition in the model that I use and the one that I teach from, if it's a person or human being that is degrading from being attached to this world and not moving on, or to use the new agey terms of crossing over, then yes, your prayers can definitely help somebody that is in that condition, because a wrathful spirit behaves for all intents and purposes like a demon or a fallen angel. The average layperson wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the two. So in this particular sense, yes, it would work, it would help, and it doesn't cause any harm to you. But if it is truly a fallen angel, praying for it is not going to help or redeem it. You can't. They're beyond redemption because they're decisions are eternal. Being outside of time, there is no I did this now and I've got to change a heart later. Being outside of time means everything is of singularity. Every decision is eternal in both directions. It always was and it always will be. And that's kind of the nature of the celestial, or what the church refers to angels. Now, one thing that I think I should also add to this that's also important to understand is that the church's definition of an angel is a lot broader than people think. It's more than just a messenger of God or some kind of species that he created alongside as little helpers in his court kind of thing. The term in the Judeo-Christian sense, now maybe the church has kind of reduced it to that in these days, but in the Judeo-Christian sense, theologically speaking, the term angel refers to just about any incorporeal being. It really does, which is why you have the idea of fallen angels being angels still, because even though they are evil and do evil things, they still fall into the category of a non-corporeal intelligent being. And so therefore, to reduce the idea, it depends upon which direction you want to take, how far back you want to go in the theology. But the further back you go into Judeo-Christian thought, the more you find that angels are a very vast amount of possibilities there. So you could almost say from that definition, from that more ancient definition, that just about any incorporeal being, an elemental, jinn, fairies even, anything that's an incorporeal being with some kind of sentience and intelligence would be considered an angel, although hardly the standard that we'd see in the Christian worldview of the Bible, which is like, you think of Saint Michael, you think of Saint Gabriel, you think of these, humanoid forms with wings and that kind of thing. And then, of course, people are familiar with the higher choirs of angels, the cherubim, seraphim, which don't look anything like people and are quite horrifying, actually. But, I kind of like that understanding because I think it's more accurate. I think when you reduce it down being like the only thing out there other than human beings are angels, and when people think angels, they're thinking what they see in art, it kind of feels like, well, there's just one other thing out there. But angels are the greater majority in the ancient sense, the greater majority of beings that you're talking about, all these incorporeal possibilities that exist out there. It's a really very interesting thing that people don't really think too much about, but probably should, because we throw, and this is my biggest criticism, we throw things around all the time, not really paying attention to the semantics, how it's used, how it used to be used, how it's used today, how vernacular changes things, and people lose meaning along the way, particularly if they're not doing this work from an academic sense and understanding the context, which is very important when you're dealing with theology. I mean, context is everything with theology, right? I mean, otherwise you really don't know what you believe, which is true for a lot of Christians out there. They don't know what they believe.
Well, it's also why you've got to get your philosophy sorted before you do theology.
No, it's not true. Yeah, it's not the truth.
Yeah, because theological terms are entirely dependent on how we think about those terms. And so otherwise, I mean, it's why oft-trod is the path where men are called into ministry and they go to seminary and then they lose their faith. And it's because, obviously the Catholic Church is more deliberate about this than others, but it's because essentially the philosophy isn't align's the wrong word. It's not prepared. Yeah, they're not, to use a biblical analogy, they're not prepared the soil, right? The philosophy is the soil in which the theological ideas are planted as seeds. And so those things have to be lined up. I mean, you just made a philosophical, necessary preconditioned idea, which is that in God, all time is present, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
So that is a really important concept to have in mind when you then look at the scriptures or the revelation of God in creation. Otherwise, you can end up really in a terrible stew of going, oh well, almost I had to correct an archdeacon once on this, almost teaching that Plan A was Eden, and that screwed up, and so Plan B was the temple, and animal sacrifice. And that screwed up, and so Plan C was Jesus.
That sounds like a type of dispensationalism, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And of course, it's not true because all time is present to God. Yeah. And so, and just as soon as you said that, it got my mind going to this, the four quartets, T.S. Eliot, right? Yeah. T.S. Eliot's the best poet that's ever lived. Take my word for it. I think that's in the Bible somewhere.
Yeah, probably.
No, it's not. But, at the beginning of the four quartets, it begins time present and time past are both perhaps present in time future, and time future contained in time past. If all time is eternally present, all time is unredeemable. And the last of that first stanza, time past and time future, what might have been and what has been point to one end, which is always present. Now, if that sends you off in philosophical somersaults, then T.S. Eliot's done his work, and you should think about that.
Yeah, I mean, look, philosophy is the foundation to theology. Philosophy comes first. All right, theology is really kind of how we take philosophy, which are a lot of abstract ideas, and sort of pin them down into something that's intelligible. I mean, that's really the whole point, and that's the relationship between the two, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, even Buddhism is the same way, exactly the same way. A highly philosophical religious system with a theological structure that is entirely dependent upon it, and the different branches or schools of Buddhism treat them in the same way, that they have their unique theological flavors, but the underlying philosophy is still there. But it is also important to understand where things come from, and so that's where context matters. And what I think is the biggest deficit that exists within modern Christianity today, at least in the United States of America, particularly with evangelicalism, is that they've completely divorced the theology from philosophy. They don't even have a rudimentary understanding of it, let alone...
and it's why it doesn't communicate.
Correct.
It's why it ends up being an anti-language. You develop an anti-language where only your little sect can communicate with one another, because you've ceased to speak the language of other people around you, and that has to be the opposite of the source of it. Well, it has to be the opposite of actual evangelism, because to evangelize you need to be able to speak someone else's language. I mean, we just had Whit Sunday, Pentecost, where the disciples are given the gift not to speak Babel, but to speak in the language of all of the assembled ethnic groups around them, so that they could understand the gospel message. And so, the problem is that you retreat up your own arsehole. You end up, you can't speak to anybody else.
I mean, that's what happens, and I mean, a lot of Christians like living in that asshole too. I've noticed, and that's the problem. We need to.
And I hate it, and it's why I'm a misfit in the church as well. I'm not playing rebel without a cause. Like, I'm not special, but you get group thinks all over the place, and I hate that. It's why I'm both extreme conservative and also a kind of reactionary at the same time.
There's really no such thing as a 100% anything. I mean, everybody has variations of everything else, I think, and.
Well, it's the order and chaos. It's the thing Jordan Peterson talks about, right?
Yes.
In order to have them in balance, you actually need to understand the order really well. So that's my ultra conservative kind of side.
Right.
I know what the church teaches. I largely believe almost all of it, if not all of it. But also you need the chaos as well, because that's too much order means you become this kind of static. Blob that's unable to communicate with the world around you. Too much chaos means, oh my God, I can't make any order out of this whatsoever. Like, it doesn't communicate.
Where it becomes problematic is that there's a fine line, and I admit this, there is a fine line between the two, but it is an essential line to walk sometimes.
Yeah.
Just because we have an immutable God with an immutable teaching, and a path to grace that's also immutable, doesn't mean that our understanding or our approach is immutable, and doesn't mean that our access to it has to be static and stationary and ancient. The Holy Spirit,
it can't be.
It should, it can't be. Right, because the Holy Spirit's a dynamic force. It isn't a static force. Jesus might be, I wouldn't call him a static force, but the function of Jesus in the term of Savior, that is a fixed point in time 2,000 years ago. That's, the death and resurrection. There it is. Mm-hmm. The Father is so beyond us, all eternal,
uncreated,
and obviously unchanging. That doesn't make him static, but it doesn't make him relatable. The Holy Spirit is dynamic and always inspiring and changing us and interacting with us with different ways. And if we're closed off to that, we're going to miss a whole lot in our journey. And honestly, this is what I see a lot of things happening with Christians today. They're so closed off. They've turned their Bible into a God. It is a God to them. And they don't know how to listen to the real one. They don't even know how to interact with it.
I think all of us are also, because this is natural, we're also guilty of considering that all things that we know are right ought to happen in our own lifetime, and that is definitely not if you
or meet our expectations, or do it in a way that meets our expectations for that lifetime.
Well, so if you look at, for example, you got the sort of ultra trad Catholics that say, bizarrely the 1962 missile is perfect, but all the changes since then have made things terrible and chaos. Now there's chaos when you go from what was largely fixed at Trent, but has, in fact, with any knowledge, it's changed a lot from Trent till 1962. Mm-hmm. The Latin Mass I'm talking about, and then of course you get the vernacular, not just vernacular translation, but also a different ordering of the Mass, and of course that causes chaos, right? You go from something quite static to something chaotic. Dynamic is another word, but actually, rather than saying, "Well, I'm in this camp" or "I'm in that camp," you're right. The answer is to say, no. There is a dynamos going on in there's power going on in the life of the church, and we've not got the balance right yet because something's just changed. And guess what? You're not going to make that happen in your lifetime, whether you're Archbishop Lefebvre or some radical Spirit of Vatican II enthusiast. That's gonna play itself out in time because we're temporal people. And in 1,000 years, if our Lord hasn't returned, people of faith will look back and go, "Oh yeah, well, it's understandable that disruption happened, but eventually we settled on something that we don't know is going to be settled on yet." And so I think the fourth dimension is something that we can all forget is a real thing. The passage of time is, and although I just began by reading Eliot, time present, time past is all present, to God, it's not the same for us, and so we there's a humility that comes with that. I'm going, well, we've got to see how time affects this. The Orthodox, they're naturals at it. The Eastern Orthodox Church is much more, we'll see what happens in 600 years.
Time is a human problem. It's not a divine problem. It's a human problem. And I would argue that that's exactly, you've heard me say this before. I would argue that time specifically is
the fall.
The fall. Yeah, we had the perfection of the eternal moment, and then we have now all these individual moments that come and go and fall out of being because the creation's been fractured.
Literally in the same poem, in the same chapter of the poem, he talks about the still point, right?
Yes,
and that's what that is. You're talking about the move from the still point. We have different words for this: kairos moment, mountaintop experiences. From the still point, where all things are present together because you're in communion with God, to time.
Yeah.
So I think that's right. The fundamental fall is into time. Time introduces aging, death, the pangs of childbirth, because it's a process. In fact, it invents processes. It's probably why I'm so averse to processes. I hate them.
I mean, they're never that much fun. I mean, it always requires a bit of adjustment, and adjustment always is a pain in the ass, you know. Yeah. All right, April, what's our next question?
We had a question from Moosh about Atlanta Airport.
Okay. I like mundane ones. That's fun.
She wants to know kind of what to expect, and is it easy to navigate and such?
I would argue that Atlanta is probably one of the easiest airports in the world, not just the country, in the world to get around. It's big, it's busy. In fact, it's the busiest one in North America, I believe.
But it's well serviced.
But it's very well serviced. Yes, it's well serviced, and it has a lot of space, and it has a tram that runs straight. It doesn't do all these weird, crazy curves, and there's really no turn here, turn there. It's just segments in a row. Okay, so it's completely straightforward. It's very easy to get around. You just look for if you're in the A, B, C, D, or E, and you just go there, and then you just count the numbers down to your gate. That's it.
Yep. Everything's above you.
I could recommend walking between. I would walk. I'll get this in focus in a second. I'd walk between terminals because
I think your filter's going to block it out. Can you turn your filter off?
I managed to get it to work a second ago. Hang on. So there we go. Yeah, I'll turn my filter off 1 second. There we go. So they have these nice little walkways.
Yeah.
With
if you don't want to do the tram, there is a flat escalator.
But if you got time, I'd walk through the airport.
I mean, they have art exhibits through the airport.
Airport. It's the easiest airport in the whole world.
Yeah, I would.
Heathrow's the worst.
Heathrow's pretty bad. I mean, I used to hate LAX. LAX is a lot better than it used to be. LAX. It's a lot better than it used to be, though. It's gotten a lot better.
It's a sea of humanity, though. There's never anywhere to sit. If you're
there at a busy time, it's bad.
And there's not really many places to eat or drink either, which I found weird.
It depends on which one you're line you're at. Yeah, they really do. Yep. But I mean, Atlanta's a good one. I would say that, don't listen to the critical things you've seen about it. I mean, the real only problem with it is it's busy. And that's it, but
if
overall.
If you see a pair of Oakley Prism sunglasses, they're mine.
Oh, you left some behind?
I guarantee they're not there anymore, Father Chris.
No.
It's probably in a TSA officer's purse.
Yeah, probably.
It's my fault. I put them in the side pocket of my rucksack. They just fell out.
All right. What's our next one?
I don't see any other questions.
I didn't either.
Tiffany has a follow-up, though, to the question about the dark spirit. Okay. She was saying it's for sure a human spirit. It just bothers me so much that they were in so much pain in life and seem to be trapped.
Yeah, I mean, that's why prayer becomes an important thing. Now, let's talk a little bit about that from the church's vantage point, because less clear is how the church actually defines this versus how those of us who work in the field understand it, because there is a little bit of a discrepancy between the two. The church kind of generalizes it out. So essentially, even though it doesn't exactly explicitly say that ghosts are impossible, it doesn't exactly say that they are a thing either. Okay. Essentially, the nature of purgatory, limbo, these words that have been thrown around in different contexts. And the church, I mean, limbo is kind of out of vogue now. So really, when the church talks about what happens to us after we die, it really only talks in terms of heaven, purgatory, and hell. It doesn't really go into getting stuck. It doesn't go into limbo anymore. And limbo wasn't even that. Limbo was more about where the unbaptized babies go, that kind of thing. So in a sense that, what we see in the field, though, and working in this spiritual problem resolution dynamic, is that, yes, I mean, people do get stuck. And I would argue that that is a significant part of the process of dying, that I think the erroneous understanding that people, particularly Christians in this sense, have, this is where Buddhism can help a lot, because Buddhism doesn't have this flaw. Christianity has this flaw because, again, it wants to stay static. It wants to just be like, okay, we don't know about this, so we're going to act like it doesn't exist. But it does not open the new information. And because the Bible doesn't say specifically this or that, then they're not willing to even entertain new information. Buddhism is not like that. They're an observational religion a lot, and they do a lot. Some of them, the more advanced practitioners do actual observation of these things. So this is where a lot of the information comes from. And if you do this work like I do and what Jamie does, then you see it. You see it, okay, and okay, yeah, the Buddhists got it right on this one. So what is that? All right, so things don't fall into clean categories. All right, so and the biggest mistake that Christians are making is thinking that when your heart stops or when your brain stops working, that's death, that's the be-all and end-all of death, and that now you're either in heaven, purgatory, or hell. All right, that is just not true. Death does not stop at the body's cessation. Death continues in the incorporeal sense. So the body, the soma, let's use Greek terms here. Okay, so the soma dies, but the psyche, the soul, continues on for a while. It does degrade. It does decompose in death, because if it doesn't have the soma to maintain its vitality, because why does it need the soma? Because the soma is connected to the pneuma. The pneuma is the life of God, the breath of God, the Spirit, the Holy Spirit that is breathed into us. That's what animates us. That's what keeps us alive. When we die, the soma is severed from that spirit, and the psyche gets severed from the soma. So what ends up happening is that psyche, being less dense than the material world, will slowly degrade, and it doesn't have its connection to what sustained it. So it doesn't have access to the pneuma anymore, and so its life force, its literal nourishment is gone, and then it doesn't have access to the intellection of the soma, which is the brain activity, which gives it its ability to rationalize. So it has no rational capability at this point. And what ends up happening is, if it doesn't know what to do because it didn't prepare itself in life, then it gets scared. It only has emotional responses, it's instinctual responses, and it gets stuck. And so what ends up happening is that the dying process continues, only without the physical part. Now it's the spiritual counterpart. And that can be a terrifying experience, far more terrifying than even dying in the physical, because now you don't even have the brain to rationalize what's happening to you. You can't be like, well, this is death. You can't even do that. You just don't know. You become almost like a baby that's just faced with a terrible trauma that doesn't know what to make of it, what it means, or anything. And so our prayers, and this is why I'm going to throw this in here, because the church doesn't explain this well, but I'm going to on behalf of the church. So Catholic Answers, you're welcome. The reality of it is that this is why those in purgatory and the dead need our prayers, because they cannot pray for themselves. They don't have the rational faculty that makes that possible. Okay? This is why we need to do it. And that's why it's so important that we help them. So no harm's going to come to anybody that does this, even if the person's highly degraded and categorical as wrathful at this point. What is necessary is the grace that only we can give them, because they don't have access to it now. Not in that way. All right. Purgatory in itself is a kind of grace, assuming they make it there. But I'm not saying that those that are attached to this world and haven't moved on are in purgatory. That's more like limbo. And I think we need to bring limbo back, at least for this context. Maybe not like where the unbaptized babies go, but I think we need to have limbo in the sense that there is a sort of an abyss that sort of exists. And Scripture does kind of testify to this a bit. There is an abyss that sort of separates the realms of realization here, heaven, hell, purgatory, all this stuff. And I think that what we enter into in death, if we have not been able to transition on, if we don't have the fullness of grace within us, at least enough to get to purgatory, if not heaven itself, then what we're stuck with is fear. And our last emotion, it keeps us stuck. Go ahead, Father.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, to start with God in this instance rather than with the Spirit. Both are fine. I've just, coming at it from a different way. Augustine, Aquinas allow for the concept of the faithful departed appearing to us to communicate with us. They allow for that. Okay.
Yeah. It's usually in the sense that God gives a permission for a spirit to go and give an apparition. It's more like that.
So this is apparitiones animarum for Catholic answers.
Oh yeah. Got to make sure they're happy with what we're doing, right?
Yeah, make sure you spell it right, Catholic answers.
And you nailed it. This is that God has permitted this to happen. Nothing happens without God's permission. Nothing. No thing happens without God's permission. Okay? So that's the first principle. There's a philosophical principle for you. Nothing happens without God's permission, because God is God. Otherwise, God wouldn't be God. So the church allows for the concept of, like, for example, a soul that's in purgatory appearing to you to say, please pray for me. Okay? For example. Because you're right, they can't pray for themselves. God may allow them to appear to you to say that. So now, knowing that nothing happens without God's permission, if you called me to this place and said, oh, I think there's a spirit trapped here, a human spirit trapped here, and you call me as the exorcist to come and examine this, my first question is, what is this? Okay? It's not, let me go and help this human spirit. It's to assess, what is this? Because we know that the demonic forces mimic this, right? Because it draws you in. So now, the answer, the remedy, doesn't really matter one way or the other, because the answer is to offer intercessions at Mass, to pray. If all of those things are done in a Christian context, then it doesn't really matter if it's a demon playing silly buggers, or whether it's, because if it is a human being that's actually speaking to you from beyond the grave, then the only thing they're going to want from you are those very things. The prayers for the souls in purgatory, that they know the fullness of the beatific vision. So the antidote is the same. But my first instinct would be to say, not how do we help it? It's, is this what it claims to be? And the answer is usually no, by the way.
Yeah, but I hesitate to reduce it to a fallen angel, because I think that kind of thing is quite rare, and I think this happens way too frequently for it to be always a fallen angel.
I'm not dismissing what you said, but what I'm saying is, it's much more likely to be what you were describing, than it is some spirit of a human being that's trapped and in pain. I think that's in a sense the least likely thing it's going to be.
It's a degradation, and I think what really is the problem is, again, a criticism I have for Christianity, is that the metaphysics is grossly incomplete. It needed a lot more development than we've given credit for. And when you limit the doctors of the church to just this little select handful of those who won the popularity contest through the ages, then you miss a lot, because there's been a lot of people. I think Hildegard von Bingen is a great example of, she was not very popular and only became popular in modern days, but a lot of metaphysical wisdom there that was completely disregarded just because she wasn't liked. So I think this is a big issue in the church, but the fact of the matter is, there's not a good metaphysics for understanding the relationship between the soma, the pneuma, and the psyche. And what constitutes an identity as a person is all three. When you separate those things from each other, then there is no identity anymore. There is no individual anymore. So the pneuma returns to God. That's what belongs to God, because it is a part of God. It is essentially an aspect of the Holy Spirit. And the soma, we know what happens to it, right? It just, we get to watch that one. We get to see the decomposition of the body. But the psyche is a little more complicated, because, and this is where you've heard me criticize in the previous episodes that we've done on annihilationism, I've criticized the fact that the church maybe gave a little too much credibility to Plato in terms of this idea of taking for granted that the soul is eternal in nature. I disagree. I don't think Jesus would have used the terms eternal life, and I don't think that he's being metaphorical there. I think that's a very specific thing to say, and I think that it actually does mean eternal life, not necessarily, and then the consequence of the fallen world being death. I don't think he's being metaphorical about death either. So this is, again, I'm not going to rehash that episode, but what I am going to say about this is the reason that there's even an argument about this is because there is not a good understanding as to the relationship between these things. We don't really understand what it's like to be a psyche without the soma and pneuma attached. We don't, because there is no individuality there to make rational decisions. You know, you need all three parts to be rational. And when you lose those parts, you don't have it. You need the breath of God to exist. You need the soma to have the brain activity, and you need the psyche to give it the substance of self and moral foundation. But the eternal nature, I would argue, is only the pneuma. And without the pneuma, there is no. Now, let me give a caveat to this. Where can we say that the church isn't wrong, and where can we say that maybe Plato got it right? Not the god Pluto, and not the planet for sure. I mean, well, the former planet,
and not the Disney character,
not the Disney character, not the dog. No. We're talking about Plato, the philosopher. Sorry about that. Where can we say that all these comes together and makes sense? Well, here's how I rationalize it. Okay. Call it my personal headcanon, because this is what I think about when I can't sleep at 4:30 in the morning. And then I get into arguments with the AI about it. But the fact is, this is what I think is happening, okay, with the psyche. The psyche as it exists, okay, is only eternal in potential. So if God wills, in his eternal sense, to resurrect that entire individual, pneuma, psyche, and soma, then it's resurrected. It's restored to its fullness. But until that happens, until God wills that, then it's nothing. It is nothing at all. And so I would say that the psyche, when it is separated, the best, and this is only through observation. I'm not giving you some kind of like mystical awareness that I have. This is just being a priest, a bishop, an exorcist that works in spiritual problem resolution and dealing with the majority of our cases, which are trapped spirits, or I call them attached spirits, because it's really more about being attached to the familiarity that keeps them stuck. Okay, not being spiritually sophisticated enough to know what to do when they die. That's an important thing, and that most people don't regard. And our death practices are reprehensible. Embalming, autopsy, scraping up the dead body as soon as possible and throwing it into some refrigerator somewhere. These things are significantly traumatic experiences for the psyche, because the psyche doesn't just fade off and drift off into the ether, or just like floats around the clouds. It stays with what it knows. So and this is, Buddhism has testified to this for thousands of years, okay? And even before that, the Hindus. The reality is that until it can realize its state, its condition of death, it stays around the body because it's all it knows. So just imagine you're dead, but now you don't have a brain to tell you that. All you know is that I don't know what this is. I don't know what's happening to me, but what I do recognize is my body's familiar, so I stay here. And now you're having people perform autopsies on you. You're getting cremated and burned, and you think you're being burned alive. This is why it's so important to have good death practices. And see, the rites of the church and the rite of Christian burial is designed, even without it being so explicit, it's actually designed to rest souls. So this does not happen. What do you think the RIP that you see on all the Halloween decorations with the tombstone means? Rest in peace. Why would that be necessary if it was automatic? The reason it was even a cultural thing is because it's not automatic, and the ancients knew this, and people from former generations knew this. We just kind of dismiss everything as superstition now, and then we're shit out of luck when we actually face death, because it's coming for all of us, and most of us are not ready for it. So it's so important to avoid that kind of situation, to be in a situation where you still think you're alive, but you're not, and having to witness these horrific traumas that we do with embalming, cremation, even burial is not good if it's not done right. Okay, because burial, imagine being buried alive. That would suck too, wouldn't it? I'd rather be burned alive. At least that's quicker. These are horrific traumas that continue on. The psyche still thinks it's happening to the psyche, still thinks it's alive. It still thinks it's in that body. And if it doesn't know how to release itself, if it hasn't had the rights of the church, the grace of the church to be able to do that, and I'm not just talking from a Christian vantage point. I would say that, you know, the Hindu rites of death work, the Buddhist rites of death work too, to break that connection. There's other religions that have methods that help with this, but most of the secular world don't think it's even necessary. They don't even want to think about death. They think they're going to live forever or something. I don't get it. They'll go through procedure after procedure just to get another 6 months. It's nuts to me. It's nuts. And I would rather spend that time preparing myself than trying to prolong my existence. I want to be prepared. I want to be, you know, even me in my state with understanding this and teaching you, I still don't feel like I've fully grasped it all. I hope that I've got enough, and I hope that I've cultivated enough grace in my life. You know, I never feel completely secure in that, and I think that's a good thing. But you know, the fact of the matter is, this is what we're dealing with, and until we had a better metaphysics, which we don't, because the Christian church is just not open to new information, we're kind of stuck with the old semantics and the old models, and they're incomplete. Okay, so when I say, again, Buddhism helps me with being a better Christian, here's another example of where it does, because I've helped a lot of people.
The church's reticence, though, is a form to speak on these things, is a form of wisdom, because not least because it would involve speculation, which is something that the church generally doesn't engage in.
Right.
But also it would set out a blueprint for the enemies of the church to exploit as well. And so, you know, there's wisdom in the church, but it does leave a gap. I mean, that, you know,
and it does.
The gap has its own troubles as well.
I think the church typically does not engage with paranormal investigation or arresting souls like we do. If they get called into a case, it's typically they're only taking cases that are confirmed demonic cases of where exorcism would be probably required. We don't do that. And honestly, if a person has a general paranormal problem in the Roman Catholic Church as a Roman Catholic, and they go to their priest and say, you know, I think my house is haunted or something, the priest is probably just going to go there and give a blessing. That's about as much as you're going to get out of it, assuming you even get that. You might not even get that. But you're not going to get a detailed analysis or investigation.
It's not the wrong response.
But it might work, it might not work. And then if it doesn't work, they don't have a solution beyond that.
Can I comment real quick?
Yeah.
I don't mean to interrupt you guys.
No, go.
From a little bit different perspective, from a paranormal perspective, when I've done investigations, I will ask the spirits, do you want us to pray for you? And almost always the response is yes, that we get.
Yeah.
And if I say, do you know that you're not alive anymore? Everything goes crazy, as in they don't recognize that they're not there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that, you know, from a paranormal perspective, I think that backs up what you're saying.
Yeah, I could say the same exact thing, because Jamie and I, and our years of doing this work together, and my years before even Jamie was on board with us, I can testify that this is a constant, repeated thing. These are not demons playing around with us. They are truly lost people, and as soon as you pray, they go away. They
a lot of help me, a lot of pray for me, a lot of am I dead?
Yeah.
Is this death? Stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, we've shown it with the equipment where we'll do a blessing or a clearing, whatever you want to call it, and the activity stops.
The divine office has the office of the dead, and the church has this. That's basically used for the souls in purgatory. It's not used for the potential of unrested spirits that are still walking the earth. They just see this as being used to give grace to those in purgatory, which is fine. But we have found that using the office of the dead in haunted situations or where we suspect that there is an unrested soul, it works just as effectively. So that means one of two things. It means either there is a fourth condition, call it limbo or whatever else, the abyss, I don't care, and that the church just doesn't want to recognize that in this way anymore, or never did, or this unrested trapped spirit is a part of purgatory. It very well could be, because I don't think purgatory is a location or a place you go. It's a condition you find yourself in. So maybe this is part of how they work out their remaining imperfections. Maybe that's, and it's not necessarily a pleasant thing. I mean, nowhere in the teachings of the church is purgatory considered to be a pleasant thing. It wouldn't be called the church suffering if it was pleasant.
It's painful.
Yes.
But it's pain for the purpose of healing.
So maybe
remember, silver is refined in the fire.
Yes.
That's biblical.
Yeah. And think about Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. Jacob Marley, was he an unrested soul? Is he in hell? I mean, there's been different interpretations of this, but I've always preferred the interpretation, because Dickens doesn't really give us one. I prefer the interpretation that that's purgatory, and this is how he works out his own salvation, or works out the imperfections towards salvation. I think he needs to make right with Scrooge, and by helping Scrooge to not fall into the same trap. Because see, the difference between Marley and Scrooge is that Scrooge is actually redeemable. Marley was almost beyond redemption, which is why he ended up in that situation, and Scrooge is worthy of this intervention. Scrooge is always like the worst of us all, but it wasn't Scrooge. Marley's actually the real villain of the story, honestly. And is that purgatory? I think it could be. I think it might be. I think it potentially is. So these are just models, right? We don't have all the information, but these are models.
And I think that's a good way to look at the revelation in the church, because what we don't have is a synthesis of all of these things, in the Catechism of the Catholic Church that you can refer someone to and quote and read out.
Yeah.
And that's partly because Enlightenment thinking is hostile to post-Enlightenment thinking is hostile to that.
Yeah.
But you've named them. These characters exist. They've written Aquinas on the separation of the soul, John of the Cross, Hildegard of Bingen. Like, it's all there. Maybe you should write a book putting it together.
I should. I really should. I mean, maybe in my retirement. I plan to retire in about 10 years.
It's a hell of a task.
I think maybe when I've got that kind of extra time, I might spend it getting all of everything.
Writing a different book.
Well, yeah. We'll figure it out. It'll be we'll see how it goes. I'll probably do something like that, because I'm gonna need to get my mind going. I bought myself this really cool chestnut chess set. It's fully integrated electronic, and you can play against real people online, and it lights up the board so that you can move pieces. And they even have one that moves the pieces on its own. I might get that one if I like this one. It's really kind of cool. But I play, chess stimulates me. It's like I like to have like a cigar or a drink at night, and then I can sit there and play chess against someone all across the world. I like stimulation. So when I finally have time, I'll probably invest some of that stimulation into writing everything I've taught you all the years into one volume. See, that way when I die, you can read my book. All right. Next week, again, as I said, it's about aliens, all right, and UAPs, and how the Christian should integrate this knowledge, all right? What's our approach? Is it one of fear? Well, hint, no. Is it one of credulous excitement? No. It's a rational approach. It's understanding these things, looking at what's out there, what's being told, what's being said, and if either scenario comes true, how we handle it. That's next week, 8 p.m. Eastern, Tuesday. Jamie, thank you. Father Chris, thank you. And April, thank you. And thank you to our moderators, Paula, Tracy, Moosh. Thank you, everyone, our entire audience. We saw a lot of people watching on TikTok. Thank you so much. And, we'll be back next week. Again, Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern. Until then, I'll see you out there in the ether. God bless everyone.